pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to just start by welcoming everyone. We've been having some great meetings of late where we get great public participation, and I appreciate everyone who's here. Tonight, our meeting is focused on discussing the planning of our 2019-2020 budget with the superintendent's recommendation for a proposed budget, which will be encompass all of our proposed budget, and will be followed by discussion by board trustees, and subsequently after that period we'll allow public comment. We'll also allow public comment now before the presentation, but because it's important for the board to discuss the components of the budget and to see all the different pieces as they weigh against each other and how they might fit under our tax cap, we'd like to have that discussion, that presentation discussion before opening up to additional public comments. So I'm going to start by a couple of things. Can I get a motion to accept tonight's agenda? Can I get a second? All in favor? Aye. So with that being said, if I know that there are some students who'd like to speak tonight, so if you'd like to go up to the microphone behind, and if someone could help maybe take the microphone off the stand for them, or we could even do it here in front if that's easier. But you would just say your name, and then we ask that you take about 2 to 3 minutes to share whatever you'd like to share. It's really appreciated. And then if there's anyone else, the next person could speak. And immediately after that, we'll start our presentation. So if someone's ready, go ahead and introduce yourself and share what you'd like to share.
Hi, my name is Sam Toman, and I'm the founder and president of Project Positive. Project Positive is an organization that's working to make the world a better place, one step at a time. Whether it's giving out cookies to strangers, to picking up trash, to raising awareness about current events, we try to make the world a happier, more environmentally friendly, and more connected space. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Shalin Chang, and this is my neighbor Sam. Last year, we created the 5th grade environmental club to reduce waste in MSS by 50%.
These past several months, we were observing the school's landscaping practices from our homes on Riverview Road, and we were concerned about the quality of students' education and their ability to study properly. There is one specific issue we were particularly concerned about: the use of gas-powered leaf blowers to constantly maintain the school property.
This is partly because it is illegal in the Irvington village, emits dangerous toxins that are part of the emissions that cause climate change, and is not conducive to a learning environment.
During the summer and late spring, the school used gas-powered leaf blowers to clear the grass clippings from the lawn along Heritage Hill Road. The equipment sometimes makes the recess area smell like gasoline fumes. During a test, there would be the constant droning sound nearby.
According to Irvington law, leaf blowers are not permitted to be operated within 100 feet of a residence. The school sometimes operates machines less than 30 feet of my home and several other houses on Riverview Road. Also, the sound regulation forbids leaf blowers from making noise louder than 70 decibels, but the school sometimes goes up to 110 decibels.
Exhaust fumes from burning gasoline create a variety of hydrocarbons. In cars, catalytic converters transmute the carcinogenic exhaust so that all that comes out is carbon dioxide and water. These aren't any converters on leaf blowers, so the operator is constantly breathing in carbon monoxide, lead, ozone, benzene, and formaldehyde.
The blower also creates a cloud of airborne dust, animal feces, pesticides, and fertilizer. These can lead to asthma, bronchitis, emphysema, or even lung cancer if inhaled on a regular basis.
There is a sign that says, "No idling, turn off engines." A gas leaf blower operated for an hour creates the same level of pollution as 80 cars idling for the same amount of time. According to the Washington Post, A single leaf blower is capable of producing nearly 299 more emissions than a pickup truck.
Songbirds rely on fallen seeds on the ground amid the leaves, as well as the insects who shelter there for food. These basic needs are being destroyed by modern landscaping practices. It is very easy to let such small, seemingly insignificant creatures go. But apart from having beautiful plumage, they control mosquito populations.
They slow down the spread of malaria and Zika viruses. Without them, we'd find living substantially more difficult. Please consider cutting down on leaf blowers or completely replace them with rakes or leave the leaves. Thank you.
Thank you. So I just want to respond for a second. That was an excellent statement. I really appreciate that you came tonight and that you shared that with the community and with the board and with the administration. And if you don't mind, if you could email us that same statement to board@irvingtonschools.org, we'll definitely follow up and get back to you. And one thing I want to mention is that in our recent discussions around, we're going to ask the community to support a number of projects to help improve our school buildings and facilities. And one idea that has come out of that is to create a green energy task force. And so that's something that I think will give us an opportunity to explore the types of things you're talking about and other opportunities in terms of continuously improving the way that we operate our schools so that they're more and more sustainable. So thank you very much, and we look forward to continuing that conversation. If he wants to come up, he's welcome to. I know that...
Yeah.
Great. Because not only are you speaking to the people here, but we have cameras that people at home can watch the video later on. So right there is great. Excellent. Thank you.
I'm Jacob.
How old are you?
5.
And do you want to say something about we love the earth?
We love the earth.
Respect it,
Respect it, protect it.
This sounded more natural before.
It's wonderful. It's very...
And what's the second topic that you wanted to talk about with languages? What did you want to say about that?
No. Are you?
What? About Spanish and French? Should mommy do it?
Yeah.
Julia, do you want to try? Say something about Spanish and French? Okay, that's Julia. She's almost 4. So everything I'm going to say that's related to their presentation are things that I'm actually saying that they have said on their own before. What was it? No. Okay.
I want to hear you. Do you want to tell me?
What did you want to say?
Okay, maybe next time.
Next time. Okay,
All
hold
right.
on, Jacob. How about I speak and then you can add something? Or do you want to add about languages?
What did you want to tell me about languages? Can you tell me? Do you like learning Spanish and French or another language?
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that.
You're not sure? Oh,
Okay.
man. Advocacy 101. I'm going to have to steal the mic from this non-compliant child. So my name is Lisa again. I live here in Irvington, obviously, with Jacob and Julia. Jacob will be entering kindergarten in the fall. And as you might have inferred, I'm here with them to speak to 2 different issues, the environmental concerns that were so ably and articulately and thoughtfully raised by our previous presenter, Sam and Shaolin, who did an amazing job, and also about the advocacy that you've already heard for early world language instruction in Irvington schools. I might be interrupted. Yes. What did you want to say?
There's something that I really don't like is smoke things.
Smoke-powered things?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of the environmental piece and going back to the kids, they on their own have been chanting, "We love the earth, respect it, protect it," for the last couple of weeks walking around Irvington. And I know, they have responded in a very visceral way to the gas-powered leaf blowers that we heard mentioned, by, closing their ears and running away and asking to go indoors. So they really are more hazardous to the sensitive ears of children than we may even appreciate as adults, though many adults respond to them in a very visceral way as well. I was listening to the radio today and I heard an anthropologist whose name unfortunately I don't recall talk about concept that I thought was very relevant to the environmental concerns presentation, which he called anthropodenial, which is instead of casting human qualities onto animals or nature, denying that we have anything in common with nature or animals. And he said that a lot of the externalizing of costs that we do onto the environment is just not recognizing that we're actually part of the environment and that we are a species living in a habitat just as any other animal is. And if we recognize the reality of that, it could completely change the way that we relate to our natural and not so natural habitats and the way that we think about our responsibility, not just to our children, but to all other species who can't advocate for themselves even as adequately as a 3 or 4-year-old can. So I really hope that you keep that idea in mind, that we're speaking about not only climate change, but also just about the destruction of nature, which might be happening at a pace even faster than climate change can get us. So this is a very concrete, tangible action that you've heard proposed, and I hope it will be just the start of a different kind of consciousness that will pervade our schools even by the time they'll be entering them in the next couple of years. So that's on the first issue.
I'm sorry, I'm going to,
yeah.
as we noted before, we're going to move on to our presentation. So,
can I just say two quick words about languages?
Please, thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to take so long. I was being distracted. So on languages, even at this young age, the children are already aware that there are monolingual speakers of other languages, including Spanish and French, with whom they want to be able to communicate. And their first response, wonderfully, is, can we learn those languages, and can we learn them fast? Because we know that their brains are as plastic as they will ever be, and their ability to really internalize those languages is immediate and very important to their brain development and very important to sociocultural development and the ability to relate to other cultures, relate to other peoples, have the emotional intelligence that comes from communicating in different languages, and have those things start as early as possible. And we're raising global citizens. They already see that, even at a young age, that there are other communities that are different from their own, and they want to be able to reach across and connect with them on a language level. So I know my time is up, and I will pass it over to Yasmina.
Good evening. I would like to actually speak more.
I really do
sorry.
want to focus on student speakers, if there are any student speakers.
Yes,
because,
this is
otherwise
why
we're going to move on to the
yes,
presentation.
exactly. I just wanted to say, yes, I would like to actually give microphone to my son. That's okay. Just a brief thing he would like to mention that he actually experienced at Dow's Lane that was very positive.
Thank you. Hi.
I think we should keep doing the French club at Dow's Lane with Mr. Pope and making more time so we can learn more, and you learn a lot from it.
That's great. That sounds really wonderful. Okay. Oui, c'est une bonne idée. Merci. I'm speaking a little French. Thanks. Yeah. So thank you. We appreciate. I don't see any other students here, except for all of us, of course, are continuous learners, right, Mr. Samuelson? So we will proceed with the presentation. I do want to say that we did receive a number of letters today regarding the early world language, and we have been reading them and responding to them, and certainly, as many of you know, it's been an ongoing conversation for a long period of time. The benefits of early world language are not lost on us, and it's really, as we see with this presentation, just a challenge of balancing it with other aspects of our budget and the tax cap, and that's certainly what we'll hear about in the presentation and what we'll be discussing as trustees before looking forward to any other additional input that helps in terms of our weighing the different parts of the budget to get to a final proposal. So Dr.
Harrison.
Dr. Chris Harrison.
Dr. Harrison, I'm so sorry, but we have a mom who brought our infant before and is really hoping to get in 2 seconds before the meeting ends.
Ms. Bernstein, you're a tremendous advocate. I will concede some additional time. I'm sorry, Dr. Harrison. We'll wait a few more minutes. But
He's not happy.
if you could share your name and
Yeah, I will. Hello, my name is Stephanie Fonseca. I am a PTSA Dow's Lane Vice President.
But I am here today on a personal matter. It's personal opinion only as a resident and mother of 4, including my 4-month-old. Firstly, thank you so very much for your service and dedication to our schools and our children. As others have iterated and studies have shown, language studies at the elementary level do far more than teach a child another language. I will not list the tremendous benefits since I am sure you are all well aware of them. Clearly, the administration also sees the benefits since it has been included in the budget for consideration. Ultimately, what is necessary then is to prioritize items in the budget based on needs and wants of the varying and sometimes conflicting parties involved. But at the end of the day, we're all striving for the same thing, a world-class education for our students. We have an obligation to give our students the tools of rigorous and passionate intellectual inquiry and self-expression so they can grow to become accomplished global citizens. There are daily reminders of the interdependence and interconnectedness with all people in all countries. As global citizens, it is essential that we be comfortable with difference and ambiguity and global sensitivity. Over the last several years, the district has invested heavily in technology, showing a commitment to creating global citizens by providing cutting-edge 21st century technology. I believe the next piece for 21st century learning is foreign language. Also with me, I have over 24 letters or emails from parents and other members of the community advocating for foreign language in the next school year. I will not read every one of them, although that was asked. I will simply give it to whomever I'm supposed to give it to.
I'm happy to take it.
And these are emails that have not been sent to the board.
Got it.
I know you have your own 50-plus emails.
Tally,
It's different.
yes. Great. Thank you. Thank you for volunteering for the PTSA. It's nice. I haven't met you, but it's nice to meet you. You did? Oh, I'm so sorry. I am still trying to internalize all the pieces. Thank you.
You're excused. It's okay. Quite all right.
Yes. I appreciate your contribution to PTSA. So, yes. I guess just to be somewhat responsive to that certainly there has been a long process over the last couple of years from the community and from the administration and the faculty that have worked on a plan that's arrived at this point where it's a consideration in our budget. So certainly this topic is not new to us, and we really appreciate your participation here tonight. So we look forward to the presentation.
Very good. Good. Thank you. So good evening, everyone. As we've started our presentations through this process, we step back and we always reflect on where we want to go and where we want to be. And similar to some of the comments that we've already heard, whether from adults or the youngsters in the room, we want to make sure that we're always supporting the academic growth and social and emotional welfare of all of our students. We do that through not only thinking of our academic programs, but we think of our facilities, the maintenance of the facilities, of course, in preparing our staff to be able to deliver that high quality education. And in doing so, the district, the board, the administration are committed to our fiscal health. We're always looking to where we're going financially, and we are committed to having budgets that are under the cap. An occasional tax neutral capital bond, such as we've been discussing and is on the board's agenda this evening for authorization. And then to be able to be in a position where we can withstand some of those challenges that come down the road. And we look to accomplish all this while always being mindful of that tax rate and the impact on each and every resident of our school community. That said, we step back, and when we think about those guiding principles, we consider our strategic objectives, which are outlined in our strategic plan, which specifically speak to those objectives that relate to everything that we do in our schools and talking about the type of learning experiences that we value for our children. Thinking about environments where we want to encourage innovation, where we want students to explore new things and challenge themselves. The social and emotional growth that I referenced earlier, and the support of our faculty and staff. But then we are committed to strengthening connections within our schools, and I think hearing from some of our students today was a great opportunity for us to hear some of those voices, and then with the eye on the fiscal health of the district as referenced prior. So through this process that we've had so far, we've had a number of discussions. And some of that started rather informally through a board workshop and a roundtable with the administration in the Board of Education back in December, where we decided to focus on a couple areas that were of interest and priority to the board and the administration, and that was around social emotional health and welfare of our students, and then looking at staffing situations that we have where we have a number of shared staff or part-time staff and the effects of that in our school community. And then from there, we went through a process in our schools, working with all of our administrative team to be able to start identifying what those needs were. And I'm sorry, I got my date mixed there. And then February, we kind of hit the ground running with an operations and finance budget, and where we identified needs, not only from a facility standpoint and thinking what we need to keep up our buildings, but where we stand from an operational perspective, and we think of insurance and other things that the district needs to function. Then at the last board meeting on the 5th, we focused on curriculum and instruction. In this reference, we talked about a number of different areas where the items that are priorities for the school district. Included in that was world language, included in that was a social worker, included in that is technology and other needs that will be discussed this evening, certainly. Tonight we'll have some deep conversation. I'm sure we'll hear feedback from community and board and seek to answer your questions. And that feedback will be reflected on April 2nd, where we consider any revisions to the proposals that are to be made tonight. And then, once again, opportunities for board to provide feedback, and then seeking a budget adoption on April 23rd, and then, of course, leading to our vote on the 21st of May. Not only is it a budget vote and a trustee election, but it'll also be our capital project vote as well. So through this process, the board has lots of responsibility in not only considering the level that the budget should sit at, but thinking about where we want to go from an academic standpoint, and consider the type of guidance that you want to provide the administration and direction with the budget, whether it be fiscal or programmatic. That said, our budget contains a number of categories that are broken out and described before you. On the business and operations component, and I'd encourage you to go back to the district website. There's a page dedicated just to the budget, and there are links to video and previous resources where we break these items down, and there's also supporting backup financial documents that are available. But on the business and operations side of things, you can see the different categories that fall into that. The Board of Education costs, those for the chief school administrator or the superintendent's office. Office of Finance, which is business office and all related operations, legal, human resources, public information, printing, mailings, facilities, data processing, and some special categories, transportation, which is a big complicated subject, debt service, and then transfer to other funds. On the curriculum side, which we discussed recently, we think about instruction, and when we think about our budget, over 70% of our budget is directly tied to human resources, and that is salaries and related benefits, but also folded into the instructional side, beyond the human resources, are the supplies that actually head into the classroom, and some services and resources that are provided for our students. The support of our library and media centers, our guidance counselors, now that especially that we have a K-12 program, instructional technology, so that is staff and related equipment, our curriculum development and professional learning, supervision, so that speaks to not only our principals and the administrators, but the related support staff, our important co-curricular and interscholastic programs that we have for our students, special education needs, and then PPS, which is a kind of a broader term, which encapsulates health services as psychologists and a social worker. That said, each year, we always recognize that there's some natural variances, and when we think about our budget, there's different terms that we have. So when you look at the programs that are before us, those things that we have in our schools today, you can talk about a maintenance budget or a push-ahead budget, something, what would it cost to maintain what we have today, tomorrow? And in doing so, you look at the impacts that come from salaries. We look at the increase and decrease in occupational education. So we think about kids that are going to the old school VOTEC type programs. We think about our special education needs related to students that are receiving district services and those that are out of district where there are tuitions involved. Equipment needs to maintain what we have today, furniture replacement and the like. BOCES and cost of services that naturally increase from year to year, and then the impact of benefits. And they shift from year to year. And something, when we think of especially TRS, which is the teacher retirement system, pension, those are things that are beyond the control of the school district. And there's a fluctuation each year. And this year, despite it being a very, very tight budget year, we are actually seeing a decrease that helps us to be in the position that we're in today. And of course, health insurance and other contractual benefits have impacts. But that aside, when we think about just serving our needs today without doing anything different, we're looking at an increase in our budget of almost $1.1 million. So when we think about this process, as referenced before, a lot of hard work and a lot of deep thought has gone into it at this point in time. We reviewed the idea of the operational finance side and curriculum and instruction at the last meeting. And then after considering that and looking to balance a budget, we were faced with a lot of difficult decisions. And decisions that I can tell you were not easily made, and decisions that are going to be, and recommendations that are going to be discussed throughout the process. But our goal was to look at focusing on commitments that we currently have, trying to identify needs that are present today, but with keeping an eye on the tax cap and making sure we're aligning with the strategic plan. But in doing so, being mindful of those presentations that we had and the discussions that we had here with the board related to our long-range planning earlier this year, looking at staffing needs and considering that if we're going to put something forth, that we have to make sure we're going to come back and we're going to check in on it, that we're going to come back and make sure that there's effective benefits from those ads that we have, and make sure that we're really only putting positions where there is great need and where they're going to have impacts on our students. So that said, as we look through this process, and as community will see at the next presentation and probably even when there's adoption, there's always budgetary adjustments and fluctuation that happens based upon adjustments that we're able to make in the budget, additional savings or costs that begin to come in, but then hopefully more revenues. So, we function in a world where we survive on revenues, whether it's state aid or tax dollars, generally speaking. But here we're actually seeing some additional revenues that are coming in. We're seeing some adjustments that happen within our push ahead budget as well. We're looking at the sum of the new considerations that have been discussed throughout this process of just shy of $850,000, and then looking at where our revisions are. So that said, if we're looking to move forward, we recognize that we're in a position where we had a deficit coming in to be able to afford all of those asks of almost $450,000. So when we think about some of these shifts here, we have increased revenues that Carol is projecting. And we're looking at BOCES aid after a deeper review of current BOCES spending, which results in aid that comes back to the school district. We're anticipating additional aid on that front, a few $1,000s in additional transportation aid, and then increase in some tuition dollars related to interest that we have in some of our special classes here in the district. So this adds up to $115,000. That said, when we step back, we recognize there's shifts that happen all across the board here. And when we see some of these changes, we're recognizing that we're going to see some increases in our transportation expenses. There's going to be some anticipated increase related to the monitor service that we provide on our school buses, and something that in my very early years here in the district, there was a lot of discussion and interest in supporting. So we're looking to see an increase there. In the last budget cycle, we actually added a late bus. We see very low ridership on that service, so we're looking to eliminate it moving forward. Certainly a disappointment, but we're proud to have given it a shot. We look at our security services, the security guards that are in each of our schools. There were actually new bid results under the state contracts, and in doing so, we recognize that we're going to be able to save about $10,000. We're looking at we prepared an analysis of chaperone expenses and looking at those not only that occur at school level for school type events, but looking at our athletic program, and that we believe we can see a reduction in our chaperones because of the increased security costs that we are incurring this year to extend security hours at each of our facilities in the next school year. We're proposing a reduction in some of our summer curriculum work. The reason for this is that we've had some real significant investment in professional development that's been ongoing. The services that are being provided to our teachers, not only during the day, but the benefits that we've been seeing from the PLRDs, the professional learning release days. Again, some reductions in special education tuitions, and that has been through analysis with our PPS, special ed department, and looking at what we see our real costs being. And here we're seeing an increase in vehicle repairs of $10,000. And we're actually looking at this as the note says, in lieu of actually purchasing a new vehicle. We believe that there's some opportunity here as we're looking to be able to invest in our facilities, actually build a place to be able to service our vehicles, that we'd be able to keep another truck going for another year, and if need be, if we had to purchase a secondhand vehicle for a short time, we could do that as well. So when we're looking at that net change in expenditure, it's a shift of just about $7,500. So that said, looking at an overview of all of the different considerations that were presented throughout this process thus far. And I certainly don't want to read them to everyone, but there's those that will stand out as items that we're looking to maintain in the budget, and some that are associated with some of the considerations for reductions as we move forward. But as you can see, they're on both the operational side and instructional side that are important in each of our schools and classrooms. So that said, when we think about our budget and the adjustments, we are really looking at that commitment that I referenced before to our strategic objectives and current initiatives, the type of work that we've been leading and wanting to carry some of that forward to expand that on all different fronts and to serve our students well. We're certainly committed to our students' learning and social and emotional needs as are reflected here, but we're also looking at a fiscally sustainable future. We tried to consider efficiencies where possible. Did really comb through personnel needs and supplies, and we're postponing some considerations for the capital project and future budgets as well. So that said, one of the items that we had talked about, and it actually started in that early conversation in the roundtable that I referenced earlier this evening, was the need to be able to support our students. And we look at this through a couple different categories, one being social emotional learning, where there are programs that occur in our schools supported by our guidance counselors, curricular initiatives, school-based programs, and things that are delivered on a regular basis in many ways through character education programming in other areas. But we have other layers of social emotional need and family needs that are present that are served by the one social worker that we have here in district. And when we look at the needs that are present, we've identified a real pattern of data and need. Looking at the types of contacts that our social worker currently has with our school community. And when we talk about the work that she does, I want to be real clear. The work is important. It's about kids and families that are in crisis. It's about children that have need for services, families that have need for services, and she is an individual that helps connect them with these services that may not otherwise come to their world. A social worker is a great resource for everybody in our school community, contributing to supporting our teachers, as well as our families and the administrative team. In doing so, this data had been tracked over the last couple of years to look at a couple different broad categories. And you can see them as student support needs, family outreach and support, collaboration, and crisis management. I do want to note that 17-18, the year was a little bit skewed because we actually had a vacant school psychologist position for a period of time, so the social worker picked up some of that responsibility for a period of time. But when we think of one person and all these individual contacts, it's a lot to be able to provide that service, and a service that is really in dire need across the school district. When we look around to our surrounding districts, you can see a mix of the level of service that's provided, with Hastings having 2 social workers, Dobbs 3, and Ardsley 1. So when we step back and we think about those 4 key areas, we think about student support needs and really what happens in those situations. And it can get really, really specific and into the weeds when we think about what may be going on for an individual family or child. But then it gets real broad and looking at school-wide needs that are there. So when we think about student support needs, we can think about the consultation and counseling. But we also have kids that are challenged that come to school on a daily basis. And our social worker works with these families, makes home visits when necessary. When we think about collaboration, there's multiple layers here. Not only the partnership that I've referenced with school staff and family, but there's outreach that occurs here. We're thinking about the connection with the PTSA and the Bulldog Family Fund. We're thinking about the Department of Recreation and the work that goes on there. And then attend meetings with families in and out of the district, really as an advocate for our students and their families. The outreach happens on so many different levels. Referrals to outside agencies and different services. We look at a coordination of these services, home visits and parental support when it's needed and welcome. And then the crisis intervention and de-escalation that happens on the outside at times. And then, of course, those critical moments that I referenced that do happen in the schools, when children are having a difficult time, when families need some intervention from a crisis team or outside supports, when we have children, family members that are hospitalized, that there is that level of support that the social worker provides. That said, when we look at this, we look at a program that we're looking to grow, a single counselor, a single social worker. And we could draw some parallels to the work that we're doing in our guidance department, where we expanded to a K-12 model this year in looking to expand and grow a program. And in looking at this in particular, if having the opportunity to add another social worker, we know that we're going to be able to grow a program that's going to serve our students' needs, and then something that we're going to check back in and look and measure, make sure we're having the effects that we want to have in the classroom. Dr. Kaur, I would like to invite you to maybe share a few words about the work that's happening with guidance as maybe an example or parallel to what we could foresee happening here.
Sure. So with your support last year, we were able to add the K-5 guidance counselor, which is a mandate for the 1920 school year. And I want to say we were sitting here at this point last year and saying we will build that program with the guidance counselor. And so currently the counselor is, our K-5 counselor is working with our 612 counselors and an expert in the field of guidance, both in the standards as well as development of program. And we're looking forward to, in June, being able to share with you our proposal for a K-12 guidance program. Last year, we could have probably sat in the room this year, I don't know, Deb, Joyce, Andrea, we could have sat there and shared some thinking and helped to build this program, but it's really through the lens of a counselor that we needed. So I share that with the context of where we are with social worker and some of the questions that you've asked as board members about, well, what's the program? What is our SEL program? And you know, again, I know that we very quickly had parents on our doorstep this year when the mental health regulations were passed. And I would say to you, I'm looking at my colleagues, I don't remember when the ELA standards were passed or the science standards were passed. I don't really remember anybody knocking on our door and saying, hey, what are you doing about that right now? But the mental health standards, they have brought a lot of attention, as they should. I can't help but say, some of you have heard, I don't know if any of you watch Sunday Morning, CBS Sunday Morning, but if you watch this episode on Sunday, and you watch the story of an amazing high school kid and her journey and sadly of her decisions, you cannot ignore what is going on in the world right now. This is not in the Irvington world. It is the whole world. And we need to address it. And so it's not a matter of us having a named SEL program or a character ed program. It's a matter of us being a community that embraces this and says, well, there are needs out there, and we have lots of needy kids, and they're not poor kids or rich kids or of a certain color. They're all kids. And I am passionate about this. As administrators, as we went through this process, collectively, there were lots of individual needs. Dows could have said, we need this, and middle school could have said, we need that. Collectively, this was the priority. We said, what is going on in our buildings, what our administrators are spending their time on a daily basis, is in support of children. And you can see, I mean, Dobbs Ferry to have 3. I don't know why Ardsley only has 1, but I'm not sitting on their dais tonight. So I'm sitting here. And I guess what I would say to you is we see it with the counseling program, what we're building. We're looking forward to a day toward the end of the year, May, where we bring in our psychologists, we bring in our social worker, And now we are sitting around the table and we are saying, so how collectively do we provide support? And when I say that support, I'm talking about what we call Tier 1 for all students, not just families in crisis or individual students in crisis, but it is a collective picture. It is not one thing here or one thing there. It is the collective picture that we are trying to develop. And so, no, I can't tell you exactly what our SEL program is, but there isn't an administrator who can stand up tonight and tell you the work they're doing at their building level. I can tell you, and it's 7 years later, the work that I did at Main Street School that I know Joyce follows and builds and has made better than ever with our teachers, with our students. It's what we're committed to as a district. And so I'll get off the pulpit now. But I will say I am passionate, as are the administrators in the audience, that we need this. This is now. And this is not based on Irvington. It's based on really what's going on in the world.
Yeah, and having seen the video segment that Dr. Kaur references, it's really impactful. And to think about the needs that are faced, and there's no profile for a child that has needs, and we need to be very clear and aware of that. And family, correct. So when we step back and we think about this, and you weigh student well-being, child welfare, family needs, it's hard to put other things in front of this because we look at every one of those faces every day, and we think of the partnerships that we have with families, and we see this as essential and critical work. And as I said before, we don't take any staffing position lightly. We know that there's accountability. We know that we're going to have to step back and measure this, and looking at our programs down the road, that we're going to have to come back and demonstrate for the board and the community the impact that these asks are having in our schools, for our children, in this case for our families as well. And we're committed to that. We know there's a capacity for any organization and the number of staff members that we can support. So when we weighed these options, this was something that was at the top of the list, as Dr. Kaur said, but something that was a priority and something that we feel is very clearly worth that investment. Just the same, different, but same a priority. In looking at our music program, and we talked about this earlier, and interestingly, both of these considerations link directly back to that roundtable that I talked about earlier in the year. And this is one of those complicated matters where we look at situations where we have staffing that is shared among our schools. And in doing so, you can see as displayed before you the number of staff members that are deployed at Main Street School, middle school, and the high school to serve our students' needs and the responsibilities that they hold. But what's really tricky when you look at this is shared staff. When we think of shared staff, you have people that are going from one building to another. Certainly happens a little more seamlessly here at the campus between the middle school and high school. But what's a real challenge is that we have staff members that are going among the Main Street School, the middle school, and the high school. And their schedules really kind of lock the school into what they can do from an overall schedule standpoint, and really harness the creativity that could happen from a scheduling standpoint in the school. So that said, as was referenced at our last presentation, we are actually looking to add an additional 0.6 music teacher that will provide that level of flexibility. So currently, when we think about this, we have one staff member at Main Street School that is shared among all three that were on the slide just a moment ago. And when we think about that, we have sometimes cases where we have people that have an expertise in music, but their expertise and their experience is best matched or is really strong at the secondary level. And we want folks that are not only going to be able to have the expertise that can make the connection with our elementary students. So what we're looking at here is a recommendation that we're actually looking to hire a 0.6 music teacher. And in doing so, we want to find a music educator that will be dedicated to Main Street School, a 1.0 music teacher at Main Street School that would eliminate that need for the movement back and forth from school to school. But in doing so, we're looking for someone that is going to have a background in strings to make sure we're continuing to invest in our orchestra program, but an individual that's going to also have that opportunity to deliver general music program. By doing that, we'll be able to reallocate other positions, 2 shared staff positions back to the campus. And in doing so, we would like to employ a 0.6 teacher here at the campus that would focus on strings. Again, someone with a strings expertise to focus on the maintenance of our outstanding orchestra program. And in doing so, we have that opportunity where we begin to have a little more flexibility with staff here, where we can look at creative options to be able to provide more group lessons, smaller group lessons, and potentially to add other sections of music. We think that this would have a huge impact on our music program, but it's also going to have a tremendous impact on the operations and the effectiveness of the scheduling at our schools. So in looking at these proposals, we've made adjustments, and adjustments that have been challenging. Looking at a custodial position that we had presented that we're no longer considering. Facilities vehicles that were for us for $70,000. A shared service consultant, something that I was a tremendous advocate for. And unfortunately, the world language program. And looking at this, our commitment was wanting to do this right. Our commitment was to follow the work of the committee that studied this, considered feedback from the community, but really dug into this and came forward with a recommendation that Dr. Cora shared at a board meeting, documents that are posted on the website, and really wanting to have a commitment to a program that we know could be here and that we could believe in and support for years to come. We have some reductions in club stipends, and related to the shifts in positions here, some reductions in benefits as well. So when we think about the world language piece, as referenced before, we recognize the constraints that we have, and I want to be real clear to everybody in the community, to those in the audience tonight, and as well as the trustees. This doesn't mean that we don't believe in this. This does not mean that this is something that we do not value and that we do not want for all of our children. We're having the challenge in fitting into a budget where we only have a few $100,000 worth of cap space. So when we want to do this, we want to do it wholeheartedly. We don't want to be in a position where we do this piecemeal. And I'm going to be real sincere. I'm going to be real honest. My concern coming in part way is that if we're not fully launching a program, if we're not making that large commitment across the board for a K-5 program, my worry is that in future years where there are difficult, tight budgets, I worry that that becomes low-hanging fruit, as we've seen before with a program that did exist with our fifth graders. So it's really with a lot of conflict and heavy heart that we're here, but we step back and we prioritize those other considerations that were there. And unfortunately, this is not one that we've included thus far in our process. So when we step away and take a look at where we are, we're looking at things that are going to impact all of our students. In looking at a new phone system, this is not only about communication, this is about safety and security. We have a phone system that is failing that we have to replace. This is actually something that would be a cost that would occur over a few years, as it is actually equipment that we would be leasing in our school district. As referenced before, we have a commitment to providing safe and secure schools. Currently, we do have a great security staff. We've made great strides. We know with our capital project, we're going to take leaps forward. But in the interim, there's other measures that we have to pursue. And in doing so, we recognize that our security guards go home when our students go home. And there's a lot of activities that happen after those hours, whether it's student-based or adult-based. We want to begin to invest in extending those security hours to have greater supervision on our school campuses after hours. As referenced before, we're looking at the social work position. We are looking at the continued growth of our science program and purchasing additional units of study and materials to support the implementation of the New York Science learning standards. Technology devices, and when we talk about technology, we're looking at an investment across the district, providing additional devices at each of our elementary schools, and pursuing a one-to-one model in our middle school that would provide a Chromebook for every single student in our schools that they would take to and from school with them. And then we're looking at expanding and phasing that into our high school. So there's an investment here that takes that part of that next step by putting more devices in each classroom. And when we think of this program, a one-to-one model for the middle school, it's something that will grow with our students as we move forward. So our 8th graders, when they go to 9th grade, will be versed in that. Our teachers will be equipped and prepared, and the students will go to high school with a device in hand. But then at the same time, we're going to be looking at supplementing the devices that exist at the high school that we'd be investing in this year, as well as the elementary schools. So there's multiple benefits here. Our science research program, just as I was touting our amazing orchestra program before, and we'll do so again, Our science research program has grown with leaps and bounds. There's tremendous interest, and if you follow us on Facebook, to see the number of posts regarding the recognition that our students have been receiving. There was just another competition this weekend, and so check us out on Facebook and the district newsletter in the next week. You're going to see more accomplishment from our students. This program really is something that has tremendous interest and something that we're proud of, but it survives with the investment of the teachers that actually teach in the classes. And currently, we don't provide or budget for a specific stipend to support their work. As referenced before, our students go to a number of different competitions, whether after school hours or on weekends, and we need to be able to support our teachers' attendance and their leadership of our students at those events. So this $6,200 would include a stipend, but it also includes additional supplies to be able to support the program. We've been very lucky through some grants and some other means to be able to buy presentation display boards or construct new display boards. But boy, oh boy, when they get into printing those posters, it is very expensive, the paper and the ink involved. So we need to make sure we're supporting our students as the program grows. As referenced, certainly our investment in the music program and wanting to be able to support its growth and have a greater continuity within our schools. And then, of course, the related benefits. So when we look at this, all these considerations amount to $444,585. So we say this with caution, and I would say that we had a similar slide last year as well, that this is a very, very conservative budget. When we sat down in the district office, Dr. Cormus Stein and myself, and we spent hours and days going through, trying to find money here, trying to find money there. And I got to tell you, there wasn't much room to go. And with that, considering where we are, there's areas where we always have concerns. When we think of areas of special education, we know the students that are here today. We can anticipate the needs that they may have through our own experience, CSE process, our partnership with families. But we don't know about families that are going to move into the community or needs that may evolve down the road that we don't foresee right now. And that could result in new expenditures. Also, when we think about the tax cert world, we're always managing our tax certs, and we don't have a huge reserve to be able to support them. And when we think about the random home in the community, and if someone appeals their taxes and they realize a reduction, that's something that can be managed in a more reasonable manner. But when we think of the 119 corridor and all those office parks and the hotels and the grocery store, when they go in and appeal and they come back and you're thinking hundreds of thousands of dollars, millions of dollars at times. So we have exposure and concerns on that front. And then you think of our facilities. At any given time, you could have an emergency that has to result in a mid-year adjustment, in whether it's looking at our operating budget or considering other reserves. So we have to be very cautious and always be mindful that we have a fund balance that's there to be able to support emergency needs, but it can affect our operating costs as well. So our process, don't want to be redundant, but I just want to remind everybody that it comes back and it stays true to all those goals that I outlined in the beginning, and thinking about what our objectives are for student safety, student learning, social emotional learning, thinking about access to technology, but it's a responsible tax cap compliant budget. So in doing so, I offer a bit of an overview of our projected revenues. You can see some of the shifts, and the one that should stand out to everybody in this room is the state aid. That we're actually seeing less state aid in Irvington of about $250,000. We're hopeful that through the state budget process, we'll see a few more dollars there, but typically when those adjustments come in through the Albany-based discussions and negotiations, it's a few $1,000s. It's nothing that's going to be grand that's going to overcome those reductions. We're seeing some decreases in tuition here, some increases in sales tax revenue, which is related to the economy, and then some other miscellaneous items to see a modest variance of 2.5%. An overview of our tax cap levy here, and the allowable increase is 3.21%, which is, you can see the net increase of $1.755 million. Again, an overview of the budget to see how that money breaks out. And realistically, the thing that should resonate is the point that I made before, is thinking about how all those pieces of the puzzle that add up here. And when we think about salaries being just over 50% and benefits being over 20%, realistically 72% of our budget is directly tied to people. And you can see how the balance of the costs spread out. And then, of course, the expenditures and the line-by-line increases that we see here, and the related variances. And, of course, you can see certainly the variances. You add up the push-ahead number that I referenced in the beginning of the presentation with the considerations. It equates to that 1.5% and a variance of 2.5%. So that comparison of revenue and expenditure, again, I'm not going to read, but give a pause for folks to take a look. And then the budget trends, to look at where we've been and the shifts that we've seen. And, you know, we provide the past years just as a point of reference, but we have to remind ourselves that because of the reevaluation that did occur, we started a new foundation for ourselves. And so what we're looking at here is looking at the increases from last year, where we started off with that new benchmark. And we're seeing a case where we have a percent budget increase, 2.48%. And when we look at a tax rate increase, and the tax rate, think about how it affects you at home, we're seeing a 0.07% increase. A simple formula, an equation of how to figure that out to calculate how the proposed budget relates to you and your personal taxes. And then just an overview of where we are. Clearly conversation and discussion tonight. Direction and guidance to administration that we'll bring back on April 2nd for other considerations. And then the discussion on the 2nd will inform a budget adoption on the 23rd of April. An overview of those upcoming meetings. And then finally, posted on our website, posted around the village in each of our buildings, is an overview of the many opportunities to learn more about the budget, have questions asked, but also to learn about our capital project. So please make note of these dates. Flyers around town, again, posted on the website, so there's plenty of opportunity to learn more and to have your questions answered. With that said, Mr. Hanna.
Thank you, Dr. Harrison. I really appreciate the work that you have done, that the administration has done. I know it's months of work to get to this point, and a lot of preparation and tough decisions, and so we'll have an opportunity to ask questions and share thinking as trustees. I just want to say briefly, budget can be a boring word, but I think what we're talking about are our values, obligations, our history, and our commitment. The values are about how our schools support learning. Our obligation is to teach every student. Our history is of decisions, contracts, laws, growth, recessions, as we heard, state funding that frame our present context. And our commitment are to today's students, faculty, staff, and also to our community and those who will come after us. So as trustees, I would ask if you could share your thoughts, your questions. This is our chance to see if we can develop a consensus in terms of guidance that we provide to the administration. We have another opportunity to revise and reflect on the budget and the discussion we have today and the feedback that we received from community members and the learning that we and insights that the administrators can share can help guide that process. So, Brian, would you like to get us rolling?
Sure. So, I guess I'll start with the biggest topic, which is foreign language. And I guess a concern I have, and maybe others have as well, is will we, given the tightness of the budget and our projections going forward, do we think we'll be in a position where we'll be able to at some point put in 2 full-time positions in one shot, or do we need to look into a phased approach, similar to what we do with PLTW and other programs, where there is a commitment to do it, we just recognize it's have to be done over a period of time? And so that's my first question, and then I'll let you guys respond to that before I go on to something else.
I would say certainly anything is possible. you know, it's hard to be able to predict what the future budgets, the future tax and finance world is going to look like for us. We know Carol's done a nice job in starting to begin the long-range financial projections for the district. However, there's factors that we don't control. So to be able to guarantee that we would be able to support 2 positions down the road, we couldn't do that. If we were to add 1 position now and to look to add another down the road, there's similar possibility. Recognize it's the increment is smaller from year to year. Just approach it with a lot of caution, knowing the history of where we've been, knowing that certainly we're in a different climate and there's a different level of engagement and commitment maybe than in the past, and not being critical. But I worry about the success of that program. I worry about being able to sustain it if we hit difficult times. So I would hate to put something out there that ultimately could be taken away from our kids, and to be able to make an investment, and not just an investment in program, but it's an investment in restructuring how our schools function, and looking at the shifts that happen in a school environment when you add a program such as that. So that presents a level of concern and a commitment that we're putting upon future boards to want to make, and to think that not only are we, whatever that partial step looks like, that then there's an expectation that we're looking to future boards to want to maintain that commitment in future years.
The question I have, though, related to what Brian raised, though, is that in order to really evaluate the foreign language component, I would expect that we would see what that would look like 5 years going forward. So if this is truly something this district is considering, foreign language, and we clearly are responding to the community because we know that the community is looking for it, shouldn't we be looking from now to the next 5 years how we make that happen? Is it part-time? Is it 1 person? Is it French? Is it Spanish? As opposed to tonight saying it doesn't work in this budget, but we'll talk about it next year. Why can't we do that? And why can't we, at this point, actually put something together that says if we are going to consider it on a part-time basis, because we could really not realistically fund it next year, 2 full-time positions, then what does it look like going forward over the next 5 years?
So I just want to be, I'm just a little confused by the question. So what does it look like for 5 years, or what does it look like for 1 year? So
any variation you want to show us.
But the proposal does that. So the proposal, in other words, whether we do it in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, the proposal remains the same. The proposal was to implement a specials program. So if you're saying how many grade levels would 1 person cover, maybe, I think that's what I'm hearing you say.
I'm saying in any variation of what has been proposed in terms of this, in November 2018 elementary world language proposal. Yes, one of the proposals you put before us is 2 full-time teachers in order to accomplish this initial goal. But is there another variation of it?
The variation would be either K-1-2 or 3-4-5.
How do you make that work if that's the case?
It's the same way it worked when it was, if it's going to be a special, then the students would go to the language once a week.
In terms of hiring. So in other words,
you need 1 full-time person to do that.
1 full-time person, and it would start next year if there's an opportunity to. There's no other method. In other words, there's no other way to accomplish that.
Well, I can give you how it was accomplished in the past, which I would say was really a terrible way, and I would be very, very disappointed if ultimately this was the outcome, which was we created another shared person, and we had somebody coming from the high school down to 5th grade, and that was how we met the need. So we didn't hire somebody. We just had somebody, instead of teaching 5 sections or 5 sections at the high school, they were teaching 3 sections at the high school, actually a little bit at the middle school too at one point. So those are the options. The options would be 2 full-time people. Anything less than a 1.0, though, it would be very hard to hire a 0.5 person. Again, we can disperse them based on the number of periods they would teach in a week, but when you bring in somebody at 0.5, they're really not part of the school, they're not part of the community, they're not necessarily going to be particularly helpful in helping us build a program. They wouldn't really feel part of the 612 department because they're barely here, and when they are here, they're at the elementary. So I would say anything less than 1.0 would be highly problematic, and our evidence of it is what happened in the past. So I think when the World Language Committee talked, and we talked about the idea of 1 versus 2, we actually had a long conversation about whether it should be K-1-2 or 3-4-5, and obviously the argument is, in some ways, is for K-1-2 to start it at our youngest, with our youngest students. But the other part was, I think, it's hard to have faith that we would necessarily get this, you would have to get the next position the next year. Otherwise, we would have kids who had language K-1-2, and then it would end, and then they would get to 6th grade. So the other option is to implement it 3-4-5, so at least there's a continuum into 6th grade. Does that make sense?
It does. Just for clarity, in order to implement the program as proposed, you're either hiring 2 full-time people, or you could break it up into 2 years and hire 1 full-time 1 year and 1 full-time the next year. And those are the only 2 options, really, that fulfill the mission and the objective of the program as proposed.
I mean, I'd be open to someone's suggestion,
Well,
but
we're
I don't mean everyone out there, by the way. I was looking at my colleagues over there.
I'm just going to say, I assume you've looked into all of this. That's why I'm asking
Yes.
this question. That you had a
Yes.
committee, that you made a proposal. I just want to make sure we understand.
Absolutely.
Those are the only 2 options.
And we have, and I guess I also say that based on our history. So we have a history of less than 1.0, which was not the most, was hard to, I don't want to say not successful, it was hard, but wasn't sustained.
So, I guess the question is, do we want to go by topic or by person?
I say go by topic.
I agree.
So I just have a follow-up on that. I recognize the benefits of having a full-time position, and we talk about that a lot in other aspects. If we were looking to have a 1.0, does it exist out there someone who could fulfill both a French and Spanish role as a 1.0, or is that something that you're not going to find, and we don't think that would be something we could bring to the district?
We won't know until we actually go out. At any given time, so when we had the 5th grade program, the teacher who came from the campus happened to be, she's our only teacher who's actually both French and Spanish certified. That's a big unknown, and I know I see Erin back there. One of the greatest issues, and again, I say thank you again. So much of their research, the parents' research was very helpful to the committee. But I would say you found the same thing that we found when we've done our research past. It's hard to staff these programs. It's hard to staff. They're hard to maintain. So that's what we would go out there looking for. We would see.
And I say that idea of being able to have the focus on both languages is, I think, important to all of us, because we don't necessarily want to invest in just one language and say Spanish, for example, and then actually potentially have a negative impact on students that would be feeding into our French program down the road. It's been important to us to want to be able to provide both experiences.
Now, and that was the part of answer my question, because I recognize the desire to have both languages and try to figure out, how, if at all, that could be accomplished.
So can I ask just a question? In your overview of the recommendation from the committee back in November, it says a certified FLES teacher. So there are teachers out there that are certified in this. Does that mean they're certified in multiple? What does that mean to be certified FLES?
They're certified to teach foreign language at the elementary school. It's not language-based.
But FLES.
Foreign language at the elementary school.
Okay.
So the teacher's certification is a FLES certification. They are certified to teach a foreign language at the elementary school.
Okay, but
It's
it's
a
not
very rare
language
license.
specific.
No.
Okay.
Right, unlike secondary, Maria.
Right. So I've been thinking about this foreign language and thinking about all, that we've been over. Looking at the report that you provided us, looking at the different schools that you guys cite in here that you went to. It appears that none of these schools offer a FLEX program. They all have FLES programs with an S, because it sounds like the same, but it's not. And I understand that you guys are recommending the FLEX program, but it seems odd to me only because the change at the secondary level, where the emphasis and the change in the curriculum is building the students' listening skills and speaking skills, to me it feels like the FLES program complements that, because it is more about the speaking language. rather than, you know, these other bullets that you put in here, to me, which speaks to what is already happening at the elementary level, which is global citizenship, right? So to me, that's expanding on that and not really about the foreign language, which is what I think we were more looking for as a board.
So if you look at the bottom of that page, I also priced out FLES versus FLEX.
Right.
So there was a cost factor.
Right, and Chris earlier during his presentation, he talked about low-hanging fruit and things that could be cut, and I agree. That was a low-hanging fruit back in the day, because it didn't work. Like you referenced, a teacher coming from the upper campus, coming down, it just was not a good system. So I seriously think we should consider hiring one teacher, because I see it takes 3 teachers to do the whole elementary for a FLES program, a true FLES program. So I think you've seen it, that if we make a commitment, we can have this discussion. I don't know if the board agrees with me or not, but we could roll it out in 4 or 5, a true FLES program.
I just want to say that's not what the committee recommended. So I hear what you're saying, Maria, but this then feels like, here, the committee worked, went through a lot of information, built their capacity, talked about what they believed would work in both Dow's Lane and Main Street. Our foreign language, our world language chair was there. I'm just saying, so this feels like a different conversation then, because this...
It does feel like a different conversation. I feel like we've never really even had this conversation totally. But you know what? But at the same time, it doesn't... So you're saying this is what the elementary teachers and the committee, and I'm not discounting what they're saying, but what I'm not seeing in this list is the secondary, with the exception of Allison Tempest.
Because she's the chair.
Right. We have a program, 6 through 12, that we have spent the last number of years investing in and rebuilding and redesigning that curriculum. I don't know. To me, as a board member, looking at the district as a whole, I feel like this recommendation does not complement all the work that has been done.
Let me answer. Let me give you some feedback on that. So here's where we are. We sit around and we talk with the foreign world language chair sitting in the room with all of the research, with all of the data, and with a room full of elementary teachers, and who all have concerns about this being a viable method. The difference is, big difference, 612, is you have those kids and they're your kids and you're teaching world language all day long. When we look at our elementary classrooms, our teachers cannot get to everything that they need to do. They just can't. The demands keep growing, the expectations keep growing, and the committee felt really strongly, by the way, that we weren't minimizing this. We weren't like saying, oh, we were actually marveling at some of the great paths that we send our students to 6th grade in art, in music, and that 5 or 6 years in a focused area does produce something. It creates interest. Our kids go to the middle school loving music, being in performance music. Our kids go with passion. And so as a committee of teachers, looking at what's realistic, and you know, I know we can all sit around the room and we could say what we believe the priorities are, but, excuse me, we have elementary teachers who are trying to teach reading and writing and science and social studies. And this was a group of teachers who were passionate about world language. They really were. There was such support for it. But we are also proposing to you a balance of how do we do it all? How do we do RTI and pull kids out? And I would love, you know, and Dave, I'm looking at you, you know what it feels like to live the day of an elementary classroom. So we can all have great ideas, but in the end, our goal is to provide a balanced experience for the students of Irvington. And we walked away from this saying, you know what? We see what kind of art our kids produce. We see the level of music our kids engage in, or the kind of athletics program we're trying to provide, or the engagement of kids in athletics as a result of what some of the things they do in our PE program, our gymnastics. We do a lot. And I will tell you, the committee felt really strongly that this was a win-win. This was a way to say, we want language, we want our kids exposed, we want those moments. We talked about developing the curriculum at every grade level through the same lens we did 612, which is developmental. What does it look like in K? What does it look like to engage 5- and 6-year-olds in a language versus 4th and 5th graders in a language? And over time, if we're really doing this well, fourth and fifth could morph into something else. But the committee felt strongly that we're doing STEM, we're trying to do it all, and we want to do it, and to do this well, this was the proposal that we all walked away from hours together, using the research of our community to say, we feel good about this. This feels like, or we could send our kids forward saying, they really know and understand and can engage. And knowing how strong our 612 program now is with a focus on speaking, because our goal is to have every child leaving Irvington who's taking 3 and 4 years and 5 years of language as speakers. It's crazy. I want them to have the grammar, but we want them as speakers. And our 612 program, we are so committed. You walk into our classrooms, world language, our kids are talking. They're not risk averse to speaking in another language with their friends, which is really the problem when you're a grammar-based program. So I think with Allie Tempest sitting there as the chair, we felt like, wow, we could really have something that feels good, that feels right, that supports learning, that accepts and acknowledges all the different demands without minimizing any one of them. So again, my passionate prayer.
I hear that, but I mean, I guess in you know, looking at different schools and seeing what they do, here's my 2 questions. One, with the exception of one school I found that does a hybrid of both, I haven't found one school that does a flex program.
Flex?
Flex.
Could you say?
With an S.
With an S at the end. An X at the end.
F-L-E-X, like flex?
I can't find one school, except for one, that does a hybrid, but I can't find one in Westchester that does a flex program. So if you know of any, I would love to know. And 2.
No, that's not true. It is true? Okay, I'm going to go back, because I'll go back and check my data.
And then my other question is there are all these schools, great schools, that do offer a flex program and offer everything else that you just said.
So I called the administrators in every one of those districts. And again, I don't want to, I am happy to provide you with all the data and all the feedback of programs that they were doing flex and they are switching to flex. The other piece I would say is then let's look at all the schools, including Irvington, that over the years have implemented programs and also then eliminated those programs. So again, and I say that not in support of what we should do, I say it that as a World Language Committee, we felt very responsible for putting forward a proposal that balanced the needs and the parameters of what our current elementary schools look like. And that's it. But I am happy to give you that other data because that's actually it's not accurate, and maybe those schools have since changed, but I did call all of my colleagues.
I want to just slightly pull back and shift the dynamics. So I'd like to ask if Joyce and Deb and Andrea might be able to share their perspective and experiences, having been members of this committee, in terms of your principles, and you have to deal with trying to fit it all in, which is one of the questions. You've had to deal with implementation. We have PLTW that's starting at some of the younger grades, and I've seen in the secondary how over time that becomes a different thing, and so what you're seeing in year 1 and 2 and 3 becomes something very different in year 4 or 5. And if you could also speak to what the feeling within your buildings to the degree that you've observed, or with the committee specifically around this potential initiative. I don't know, maybe, Joyce, if you're available.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I would really reiterate a lot of what Dr. Kaur shared in terms of the work that the committee did. So at Main Street School, similarly to Dow's, there is a lot on the plates of every single teacher. And so the teachers who came together for the World Language Committee came wholeheartedly because they have a passion and an interest in exploring the possibility for students to have the experience to study a world language. I mean, I can speak for us at Main Street School, and for those of you who have had children go through Main Street School, we have a big push around global citizenship and what that experience means for kids and what opportunities we provide. And looking for an experience with world language fits really nicely with those experiences that we have, connected also to the technology opportunities and all the things that have been mentioned. But I will say that with everything that we add on to what the experiences are for our students, we also have to consider, like, what's the impact? Like, we don't really talk about, like, what do we take away, ever. We only keep talking about what do we add. So when we went into that room, we went in with the desire and the passion of considering a world language, but also, like, what's realistic for the experience that happens in one day. We don't have all the time in the world. We have math and ELA and science and social studies. We have Project Lead the Way. We have our specials. You know, we also have programs that we do in each of, I don't even know where they're, in each of our schools that we also want to bring to our students around character building, our social emotional learning experiences. And so all of those factors come into play. And so we made the recommendation as the committee. That's the recommendation we came to, because we said, how could we make this work so that we give students the opportunity to have that culture and language experience that will set this foundational experience for them and an exposure experience, but that won't, we knew that we weren't going to be able to provide something that would have our students be fluent in that target language. It is very tricky. You know, and you could think as board members, you know, that we don't really talk about what comes off. We talk about what gets added on. And our teachers are in the room playing this balancing act every single day. And they're also, at times, they're learning new curriculum as they're teaching it. And we're providing that through our professional learning opportunities. So we try to be really thoughtful in how we do things. And I think that's where that is where the recommendation from the World Language Committee came from.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for Dr. Cantor and I, we agree with everything that Dr. Kaur and Joyce have just shared. I would say one of the other pieces that we looked at was the importance of world language. And Joyce and I had the opportunity to see how it was done in a different format, where a world language teacher actually came in on a rotation for 15 minutes twice a week. So I would just want you to imagine just the scheduling of that. So you have a classroom that may be in the middle of math instruction, and that's the time that the world language teacher steps in for 15 minutes and steps out. So from Dr. Cantor and our perspective, working with our youngest learners, where they're very resilient and flexible, we also believe in the importance of this. We believe in setting the stage for learning. We see the success of it with PLTW, where it's very focused, it's very important to them. It has a dedicated space. There's a feeling about it where students can enter into that space in the world of STEAM and really engage in that type of thinking. We would like to create that same experience for world language, where it's not just a step in, step out, where we see success in those things. For example, nutrition education at Dow's Lane, they do a half an hour, but it's only 4 times a year, 5 times a year, where this has to be sustainable. It has to be something that we can continue to support teachers. And for teachers then to also have that valued experience to participate in a meaningful way, like PLTW, where they're present for the experience, they're engaging with students, and this special area type of situation would provide them the opportunity for their own meaningful experience while we're engaging children in the learning. Does that make sense? Okay, any other questions for that, or?
Dave, do you have a question? Not necessarily for...
Not for you guys.
But you can...
Thank you, though. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
That was very helpful, actually. I appreciate them speaking on it. To me, this is very simple. I know it sounds very complicated, but I'm looking at... I'm going to bring it back to funding again, not the value of the program, because I love the present... I thank you very much to the committee, to the families, the parents, everybody who worked to get this proposal in front of us. I tend to agree with the notion that which is the one that we're doing, the X or the S?
Yeah, X.
We want to develop the flex, right. So I think it's the right piece. I said it the last time. I think you disagreed with me last time, but you agreed with me this time that this is a great first step, and it could eventually scale out to who knows what. So I like that concept of it, but to me it's very simple. I look at the operations and finance, and I see 73,560 for an afternoon event security person, and I see on the curriculum and instruction side technology devices. So there's $160,000 to me that fills I feel like we need to put the actual human children in the terms of priority here. Not to say that we don't need the tech. Obviously, the tech's important. I in no way devalue that ask at all. I certainly understand it. I do feel that I feel that there are alternative paths to finding that technology, but the actual visceral and tangible experience of language learning over getting quicker to that one-to-one piece, I think, is really important for us to weigh in on here. And again, I'm a big tech fan, and I believe it's necessary, but, and then the afternoon event security, we have a bond that's digging into a large chunk of security pieces, and again, not to say that that's not important, but I feel like we need to be prioritizing human children here in an academic way, that those two pieces can wait a little longer. So it's less a question and more just an appeal for us to really weigh that idea that we have lots of computers. We're going to eventually get more computers. You know, and you talked about longevity, and I think to myself, well, the tech's going to be done in a couple of years anyway. The language experience is way more lasting and more powerful. You know, I think about the children again, and what we as adults want for them, and again, balance being the key, and I don't think we're looking to do something else, but I feel like if we have the opportunity to fund something that will promote one of the district goals, and the other ones do too, I understand, but we've been working on this for so long, and we did the same thing with PLTW, and look where we are now with PLTW. It's a robust and amazing program. So I just think that those are two, this is just very simple to me.
If I just respond, and you know, this is valuable for us. We're here to provide information, and I'm not here, I don't want to come across as being defensive. I just want to provide clarity around the security ask that's there. That's something that has really come strongly, not only from our faculty and staff that are here after hours. We've heard that repeatedly. It's been trustees that are on the safety committee have heard that request from our faculty. When we've, last year, following Parkland, as you'll recall, we had a whole day focused in and around safety and security. We had our local police here where we sought feedback from our staff then. We did the same this year when we kicked off with Alteris and the training, and feedback that came back on that front did relate to that. I would also say that when we look down the road, and looking at our schools being more secure in, say, 2 years after all the construction would be completed with a successful referendum, that I would still foresee that level of security being there to be able to supervise and welcome our guests and visitors after hours. But I understand your point. I just want to provide that point of clarity.
I just want to clarify again. I certainly understand the importance of it. I know the ask. I just feel like in this situation where we're weighing the pros and cons of things and the benefits of things, and in my this board member's opinion, only speaking for myself, you know, where I stand is this is an easy one to get, but maybe not super easy.
Can I add to that? I had kind of similar thoughts, although the technology devices I see as really important, given, you know, I'm not going to rehash everything that you had said prior about the devices and at the middle school. My question I had written down is, did you, because the IEF and the PTSA doesn't fund positions, but have you asked if whether or not that's something that they would help fund, knowing that other things could be added to the budget?
We have not had that conversation. I'm assuming my next word is yet.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I had said, like, you know, there are.
But, no, I would say there's history there too. So there's history. You know, when we think about where we are today, and you know, we utilize Chromebooks, and everybody knows that, and that's no secret. That we started that initiative going back in a grant in 2012, 13, or 13, 14, 13, 14. Our initial pilot program, where we got 100 Chromebooks, was through an IEF grant. When we launched PLTW, the PTSA funded our iPads. So we've been there, and we've had that partnership. So it would be, so we've drawn on them for that in the past. There may be opportunities for other creative fundraising efforts that could be out there that we could explore. So I don't know if the appetite is there. It doesn't mean the conversation can't be had. but it's something that would need to be explored.
I just want to keep it on, since we're going by topic, the early world language.
Yeah.
Yes, go.
So I fail to understand something. You know, we've talked about the history of PLTW and how we had a sort of stop and start rollout of that was consistently defended by the administration about the way to do that. You know, we couldn't do it all the grades at one time. There wouldn't be sufficient funding. That's all I'm saying. So I don't understand. If we were going to do the 2.0 positions for foreign language, you would have to roll it out K through 5 at one time. So if you did the one position and it was grades 3, 4, and 5, and we know that the way our curriculum works from grade to grade, we have a K through 12 overview understanding, and specifically moving our children from school to school, that's to at least start with the 1.0. And I understand your concerns, you know, how are we going to find a French and Spanish teacher? But the truth is, when we discussed the social worker at our last meeting, and we asked how we're going to know what that person is going to do, we were met with the answer, well, we don't really know what we're going to do until we know what we're going to do. And similarly, that could work for the foreign language program if we look at doing a modified rollout. If we can't have the entire 2.0 to see what the 1.0 will look like. And I think it's important to talk about that in a serious way.
So I guess I should watch myself on video, because I didn't think I said anything. You asked me some questions. I answered the questions. I think I've been pretty clear about my support for this. I think my concern about the two positions, I am not concerned about developing it with the person who we hire. I said it is hard to find someone with the Spanish and the French. So I don't know, Beth, I feel like I'm not saying that I'm not for any of those things. I think the one point that we're making is the level of concern that, unfortunately, we have a history, we've had that history, and other school districts have a history that this is a program that goes. So I'm not in support.
I don't understand how you can say that the history of somebody who's come from the high school campus coming down shows you that hiring a 1.0 specifically for 3 through 5 would have the same risk of failure.
I'm not saying that. That's what I'm saying. So I really feel like I'm either being, like I'm not communicating well or something right now.
Okay, well then if you don't feel that
I've
way,
had
then
And I think I also heard her say she went to other, you're looking at other districts, and that's.
Right, I'm not talking about hours, I'm talking about when budget time came and we had to cut something, that was what got cut. I'm talking about other school districts that there's a history of school districts who have put it in and taken it back out. I'm happy to share my data with you about school districts that started with FLEX and have shifted to Flex. For me, I'll be honest with you, I am in support of having a world language program. When we're, though, sitting in the room and we're whittling down and we're taking things away, if you said to me, well, Raina, what do you think is more important right now? That's really where you're hearing. I'm not actually talking about the world language program at all. I was acting from this perspective. If given the choice, and this was all the money that we had, that was the position we put forward. You're now proposing some other things, whether it be changing the technology, security. That's how this goes. That's the next round. We take your feedback. But I would hate for anyone to walk out of this room tonight and somehow with the perception that I wasn't in support of world language.
No, I never said that.
Okay.
I said that my inference from conversations that have been had at this dais or this table or whatever you want to call it, this U-shaped object, has been that it's 2.0. This is how I've been hearing it, or we have to put it aside. And I just do not believe that that is the correct position
Understood.
to take
Yeah.
in thinking about this.
Yep.
And it's fair to say, because there's not an alternative being presented. I mean, I know that you put forth your best, and this is what you think, that's what you're recommending to us at this point. That's how we're reading it. You did not give us an alternative. So as a result, I'm sure as Beth is saying, trying to come to terms with, well, we're kind of put in a funny spot as a board to say, well, what about a 1-point position next year? And does that mean then that we can commit to it like PLTW, and there's another position added in 2 years? If we could see that in the next round when you come back, I think it would be helpful. Because for me, I just want to add, I come at it a little differently than Maria. I'm not looking to redo the work of the committee. The committee's recommendation is what's before us. I don't want to suggest that I want to look at another alternative. I think that we have to take this committee's hard work, the folks that put the time into it, and this is what is before us and only this. And whether we have 2 full-time positions or 1, that's what's on the table. If you're going to propose another flex, program and it's slightly different, I would be uncomfortable with that because this is the year's work that went into it, and this is what I
Thank you.
evaluating.
Just to add, I second what Deb said. I think, my concern just goes back to, if we're going to put a 1.0 in, I think it's important it supports both languages, and that's where we get into the challenge. And, I don't know, what else we can try to develop between now and our next time as to, whether we think that, I know it's difficult, and I know it's a hard ask, but I think if we're going to try to do it, the phase in, it also has to be in a way that supports both languages, and we need a path to see if we can do that.
I love the idea of this negotiating, but I don't think it's feasible.
Okay, yeah,
With
it may
one
not-
person.
it may
I
not be.
actually agree with you. Because then what is it, right? It's like this little taste of maybe something. And then it's like, see, scaling is like, you have to do something deliberately when you scale it at the beginning. And then, so if you want to scale amplify, for instance, you have to do it at X grade levels, which we'll talk about, I'm sure, in a few minutes. But the same thing with this, you have to actually do what you intend, like Deb was saying. And then if it works, fantastic. If it doesn't work, how do we then tune this, right? So I don't think that's the right way to scale. It's just my opinion.
Right.
So Dave, can I just clarify something based on something Dave said? So originally, the idea by having the 2 people, it also opened up more flexibility. So we could have a Spanish teacher and a French teacher, and ultimately, in other words, it wasn't that we'd have 2 teachers and one teacher could do necessarily K1, 2, and the other teacher 3, 4, 5. If we were trying, our approach was, and we do have a commitment to this dual language idea, that you could hire, hopefully, a French and a Spanish, so that those 2 teachers would be able to rotate in and out of K through 5. So I would say that, and again, not saying we can't do it, just saying if we went with 1, it would be, right, we would have to then think, if we could get someone dual certified, that would be a beautiful thing. If not, we'd have to then negotiate, what would that look like? But I won't know that.
No, I recognize
Until we see that.
the challenge of it, and I think
Right.
in a perfect world, we would do that where we would have one Spanish teacher, one French
That's
teacher.
right.
That obviously is more aligned. I think, as a board, we're just trying to think if there are ways to scale it, to at least start the program and do it. It may be that we just don't think we could realistically do it that way, and if that's what we hear, that's one thing, but I think we're just, trying to wrap our heads around, given our budgetary constraints, what possibilities we'd have besides going to a 2.0.
Right.
And I
Laura,
guess I
did
would
you-
be interested, in terms of, let's say that you couldn't get a French and Spanish certified person. Quite honestly, I guess I'd be interested, and I'm sure you could provide this to us in between our next meetings. There are students who start with French in middle school and switch to Spanish. There are probably students who do the reverse. There are probably students who go and add on Latin or Greek. I understand that it might end up that you could only have a Spanish instructor for grades 3, 4, and 5 for the first year of rolling out, but then perhaps you could remedy that afterwards. So just a suggestion.
Yeah.
And I hear you. I also just want to say, from those of us sitting in the committee, the level of desire from our secondary teachers to not isolate to one language is strong. So I'm just putting that out there. Doesn't mean we can't do it. I'm just sharing with you sort of the background.
Let's give Maura a shot here.
So my comments had also been around some of the things our colleagues had brought up here, but the one that I keep coming back to that I haven't heard about in your research is our school size. And these scaling issues that we get into are to some extent about the size of our district. So when you're looking at bigger schools that have these programs, I mean, it gets easier the more students you have, no?
Always, yeah. Our limited size affects us in a lot of different ways. I think, Maura, it's a good point. We definitely looked at schools of different sizes, but, you know, and every school makes it work their own way, right? There's no one model for this, and that's kind of the good news in all of this. There's no one way that we have to do this. I think there's lots of ways for us to look at this. You know, for me, in this part of the process, that's the process. I could argue for a lot of different positions. That's my job. There were a lot of other things that didn't make it to the screen tonight. I could have argued for every one of them. My job is to present and give you the background, the facts, the work of the administrators and the teachers, and then it's your job to push back and say, all right, but here's where is our priority, or we don't want this, or we do. And so that's how this budget process goes. We leave tonight, and then we sit back in the room and we try again.
This is not directly related to the foreign language question, but because somebody among the trustees raised the afternoon event security issue, and then we talked about the safety committee issue, which Maura and I sit on together. I just wanted to know, is there any way to parse out the afternoon versus the event security? Because I know that there is a clear ask from staff that when they're here after hours, there's a feeling of insecurity. So just as long as we touched upon that, I understand it's not foreign language, but it was brought up in that context, if we could get that information subsequently.
The calculation that you see is actually an hourly basis. So that's because we had billed hourly by our security company, so it would be easy to calculate.
Thank you.
Is there a particular time that you?
I think would be a recommendation we
Yeah, recommendation, because I mean, I can just, it's an hourly calculation. So
Yeah, I guess it's what is the afternoon piece?
I just did hours, so
Yeah,
added
that's
hours.
Right, it's just pulling out the event to understand the afternoon, because the afternoon, I think, is the staff issue.
Yeah. So just to add my 2 cents on the conversation about the early world language, you know, when I came in, it was following on, and then now thank you for coming back, the work that Marie and others had done, and your staff had done, and there was a concern about the follow through and the support that had gone, and there were prior year debates here about whether it could be sustained. And so I guess I just want to start with a compliment in terms of the community, of the administrators, of the faculty. That a lot of work has gone into what we're talking about now, and that's very different, not just the work, but the commitment, the enthusiasm. So when it comes to that idea of concern about follow-through, I think we have it. I think this room reflects that. It's a very different environment now than when I was in my first year on the board, or even before, and I was watching the conversation from over here, and there wasn't the support. So I think it's there, and I, you know, now in my beginning of my second term, have faithfully followed through on supporting PLTW and other work that the administration and prior boards sort of committed us to, and I'm glad that it's been a success, and I've learned a lot from observing the implementation, and I think that's something I'd like to hear about from you, that, you know, can we follow that path, and we're hearing about some of the challenges, and we don't know some pieces. But, you know, like you said about the late bus, I respect and I understand the reason that we tried to make that work, and it didn't, and it went away. But there are other things, PLTW, that had some tough years, and it's here, and it's flourishing, and it's a model for other districts. So I think that we have that opportunity here. And so while it came off the list this time, I think we should look at whether we can put it back on the list when we talk again, and whether that's 2, which would maybe be too challenging with this budget, but 1 seems like that might be the opportunity.
Yeah, so I want to say that, you know, I think as Raina inferred before, and I referenced when I was speaking earlier, this is about discussion, right, and ideas and feedback. So, you know, there's ways for us to rethink things, and, you know, we're certainly committed to all the different items that have been presented, as Raina said. We sit in there and fight for each and every one of these. It's the idea of rethinking and coming back with different options, and not sitting here horse trading, but trying to be creative and find a means to an end. I heard Deb real clearly ask for consideration in different approaches, which was then echoed by a number of trustees. So, you know, that's the ask, and I know that'll be the thinking as we look to the next 2 weeks.
Yeah. I know another big question, because you and Raina, you made very impassioned explanations about why we need a social worker. I think we should turn the discussion to that role. I know that's one that I missed the last meeting, unfortunately, but I know that was a question and topic that some time was spent on. So Maybe just to similarly, before we ask from more questions from the trustees, you told us that the high school administrators really, and not sorry, high school, all the school administrators really find this to be important. We sat at a round table here in January, and that was shared. But I don't know if some of you might want to step up and sort of speak to that and reinforce or share other context.
Can I speak first, though? One reason I want to speak first is I do want to say, at least personally, I don't know how the other board members feel, but I do feel that this position with social worker, I feel like we've been put in an uncomfortable position in looking at this ask. And the reason I say that is that the presentation you gave and the information we received is really an emotional plea, for lack of a better word. I feel like there's a lot of emotion attached to this. A lot of the words I wrote down is all about being passionate and that it's a priority and that our administrators speak to it. And I can understand that. On its face, as a social worker, who wouldn't want a social worker? I mean, I would take 3 if we could have 3 because you give us a chart. But I will say I feel like we've been put in an uncomfortable position because every other ask that we've had in years past as I've sat on this board, when it's a full-time hire, that comes with a lifetime job, as some members of our community would see it as, and benefits that are attached to it. There's been a lot of information given to us to justify the position, whether it's the PLTW teacher, whether it's a state-mandated guidance counselor. And we've heard that this social worker position is important to this administration for months now. And I will tell you that it's the first time I have ever seen numbers put in front of us, not rattled off from an iPad, but literally numbers justifying the position, and that's today. We got for the first time, which is the day of the superintendent's budget. And when I look at what was put in front of us in terms of numbers, whether there's an increase of 59 contacts, I don't know if that's 59 students, if that's 5 students 59 times. I don't know, the nature of like the crisis. I don't understand, what the social worker did. Is that a phone call? Is that a visit to a home? Is that a report that had to be generated? I don't know how that social worker works with other positions that we have in the district. And so while I hear you and I hear the administration, let's get another social worker, it's still $100,000 that's going to be in our budget. And I feel to get the information that we did today for the first time.
We got on Thursday.
Okay, sorry, Michael,
Yep.
3 days ago. Okay, but the point is it's not enough for me because to justify a hire, I don't see what we usually get when we hire somebody for the first time. So I'm happy to hear the administration give us examples again about justifying the position of the social worker, but I will tell you, I still feel we don't have enough information to justify it.
So I guess it would be helpful to know what additional information then would be helpful because I hear you, Deb, and I'm not sure. I think different positions have actually come with different kinds of information, so I'm not sure. I don't think we have a system for what we provide and when asking. I mean, I think the world language was a function of a committee work, but right, so you have a proposal in front of you. PLTW was certainly it was a much more costly endeavor over time as well. I think what we tried to do was give you the data. And again, I mean, I think it was impromptu at the last meeting when Gail was able to she was able to read it. So certainly we could have provided it earlier, no question about that. But can you give us a little bit what would be helpful?
Well, he's biting at the bit.
I know. What would be helpful?
Because you want to...
Yes, jump in. Yeah, no.
You sure?
No, yes.
I mean, I'm going to say what I'm going to say with all due respect to the body here. And I wrote it down, so I got to find it. But you had said something. You talked about our feedback from the last time about implementing an SCL program, et cetera, et cetera. I got to be honest to what you're asking. I'm looking at other things that we've asked for. This year, last year, going back 3 years, professional development plan, data person, I can go down the list. Still waiting. Assessment. Where are we with assessment? Still waiting. And now I'm sitting here, in a tight, very, being advised that we don't want to be super conservative. What was that last bullet point? What does it say? Where is it?
Tight budget.
Very conservative budgeting may result in need to utilize fund balance, right? So this is a big deal. And I just know that if I were you, I would have come here tonight saying, we're going to implement one of these 3 programs, not, hey, we're going to do this. Because I got to be honest, I'm not buying it. I'm just not buying it. I've been told year after year after year that we're gonna, and then I'm sitting here waiting, and now you're saying again that, and with framework, we're gonna grow a program with this person, and I feel like that's the reverse of what we need to do. We need to bring a person in to a program. So right? I mean, I think that.
I mean, that is my challenge. I mean, I wrote down the same thing. We're a program that we're looking to grow, and you can't tell us what the SEL program is, but it is necessary because of SEL and the mental health standards. And so I have asked this question before. Do you hire the person to help you build the program and make the program grow, or do you have the program in place and you hire the person to work in the program? And the program for me is what we heard earlier, which is we have guidance counselors, we've got student assistant counselors, we've got psychologists, we've got social workers, now we have K-5 counselor. I would have expected tonight, and this is again me, so it's hard to know where everybody else stands because this is the first time we're talking about it. I would have expected tonight what that program looks like in terms of the department. How does it work? Not when I look at historical data that frankly I can't really understand, because even though I see a number count that goes up and goes down, I don't know what the nature of that work looks like. And it's a very difficult position to be here, which I know you can appreciate, because you want to trust, which we do, everything that you put before us, but at the end of the day, it's a financial decision for us, and something has to get cut. So if we're not ready for the hire in terms of a program, I get concerned that we're premature and that we need to give this another year.
Yeah, and I did want to say something in Deb's defense, actually, in terms of the information. So whenever we got this chart, and we had asked for this chart at the round table, and then we asked for it again last week, at that time, and I appreciate your candor about this, we didn't know that the data was impacted by the fact that the social worker was doing the job of a psychologist in addition in academic year 17 to 18, which does have an impact on the numbers. The other piece of it is when we look at this, and I want to thank you for not only this data chart that's in the presentation, but you had also provided to the board a lot of information about people personal services staffing with a great slide telling us exactly who we have now, and that's very appreciated. But when we look at it as a board, part of the other thing is we know that we have health teachers. We know that we have health teachers in the middle school. We know that we have health teachers in the high school. And we know that our PE teachers are trained in teaching health K through 5. We also know that, as was said earlier, the guidance counselor who was hired K through 5 last year is now working with the 6 to 12 person to look at, their shared expertise and guidance, which impacts SEL and the mental health curriculum. And I understand, we've talked about this, the mental health curriculum is not ready. It is brand new. It was only the subject of a statute, July of 2018. Yeah, we understand that. But still, this kind of expenditure for a tenured position, I have to add on to what Deb said with what I added to that. It seems that it should wait until there's a program that is more clearly defined.
So I really would like us to step back and talk about this word program and our social worker. So our social worker, whether it be our current social worker, maybe eventually another social worker, that is not about a program. That is not about buying a program, a character ed program or an SEL program. When we look at our numbers, and again, you may agree or disagree, but what we tried to show you also when we showed you what our some of our neighboring school districts have, and we certainly could do that for more school districts. Forget any program. Forget what a program that's going to happen in any one of our schools. Our social worker, based on those numbers, has had a very large caseload, and I think that's what we were trying to show you.
How can, I mean, with all due respect, how do I know that when I look at a number that's 27, it looks high, 104 looks high. Is that 27 phone calls for 27 children, or is that 2 families that got a call 26 times? I mean, I don't mean to be so silly.
No.
Right, we don't have the context.
No, you're not.
Something like this. And also to your point where, yes, we could look at other cohorts, but if you look at other districts, we don't know they had 4 other social workers, guidance
Exactly.
counselors. I mean, you have to look at the entire
whole program. Absolutely.
That's what we have
And
to
that's
do.
what we do.
But that's what I would have been expecting to receive. That's all I'm saying, is that I feel I am happy to hear our administrators pitch again for social worker, but it's going to feel emotional pitch again. And I'm looking for hardcore
But
information.
it's not an emotional pitch. It's emotional, the belief behind it is emotional, but the actual work, the expectation, and I hear you, Deb, and we had this conversation of how do we help the board to know and understand what that is? What does it mean to make a phone call? Is it one phone call, or is it one phone call that lasts for 2 hours, right? So we want to share that with you because that's what we're saying to you. The number of incidences, the number of connections in these 4 categories, and the vast amount of time that our one social worker is spending exceeds really her capacity. And I don't know, and we certainly could get that data, the exact number of how many social workers have, because you're right, that makes a difference. So if Dobbs has 3 social workers, then it begs the question, well, how many psychologists do they have, right? How many guys, do they have a school, do they have an elementary counselor? Those are really fair questions and information we can provide. But we are not asking for a social worker to connect to a program. The social will naturally be part of that work because it's a mental health team.
Correct. I think you're misunderstanding, though. I think the idea, it's like curriculum, right? If a brand new teacher walks into a school district and teaches social studies, that teacher's walking into a team of people that teach social studies through this particular vessel, and now they have a collaborative effort, right? Social work is a very collaborative, not just with the social worker. If this person's walking into, you said, not a named program, be a community.
No, it's not.
Oh,
It's the job of a social worker.
Understood. I get that. But you're asking to spend $100,000 in perpetuity on something that is not supported by something substantial or research-based, right? Which is a social. You quoted numbers: student support needs, family support outreach. There are curricular things that we detailed. You referenced that you based it on CASEL, and then I can't remember. Somebody reminded me.
We don't base our social worker on CASEL. I just need to
Social
clarify.
emotional program.
Right. Our social worker is not the social emotional program. In other words, when you look at those numbers, and I really want to find a way to communicate to you what those numbers, how those numbers translate. This isn't about the implementation of a program. School districts have had social workers for years. We know the needs of our families, and we have some data about how our Irvington demographics have changed in terms of need. There are serious needs. It has nothing to do with having a program in place. Social workers support the building, they support families, they support individual children, they support siblings, they support crisis situations.
How long has our social worker been employed here?
I'm sorry, say that again.
4 years.
Had our social worker for?
4 years.
4 years.
4 years. So I'll be frank, one of the reasons I'm also concerned is I look back at last year's superintendent's budget, and there's no mention of a social worker. So I don't understand, we never made a proposal last year for a social worker. In fact, in the entire presentation that the superintendent presented last year, I went through it, and I'm looking to see if it got cut, if it was one of those positions because it was so pressing, and there's nothing on
We asked for the guidance counselor.
May I ask though about, I'm sorry, Deb, but I don't understand, and I feel like this is somewhat on us for not asking when we got the guidance counselor, why there wasn't a program that she was coming into.
Correct.
And I feel that's on us.
I've explained
We
it.
added another staff member who was clearly needed because we need to be building out a social emotional learning plan which has a curricular aspect as well as responding to state requirements, but also with the social workers' student needs of many different kinds, right? But we are also here to be representatives of the community to talk about what we can measure and how we can understand the progress of bringing these various staff members together. So I want to step back and say that what I've learned over this past year from last year's budget to this year's budget was that I don't understand how to measure the building right now of social emotional care for our children without having some kind of program in place that we can look to.
I think that's well said, because at the end of the day, every hire, we're going by showing me a chart that shows the numbers are going up, I guess we're not doing so well. But I would like to know how we assess and measure that. And if we're going to, before we bring somebody else in, how do you do that with a social worker?
I feel like we're having.
I just had one more thing.
Want to
I
let
just
Gail?
want to.
Chris, you want to let Gail talk?
Just let me add one thing, just for clarity's sake, in terms of for everybody's understanding. I just as an example, I hired a social worker to come into my school last year. I had to hire a social worker. I didn't need a vacancy. I hired a social worker. And when that social worker came into my school, the social worker then proceeded to become trained in responsive classroom, restorative practices, and the ruler approach. Those were the three different things that my district was offering at the time. I don't think that we should have that opportunity here or anything like that. I'm just trying to couch the concept and support what you're saying more about the idea that there's a program in place. It's not to say that my social worker didn't do social work, didn't make house visits, didn't deal with ACS, didn't do all the daily routines of that job. But there was a structure in place because social emotional health was not just the responsibility of a social worker, but all the teachers that see the children, the parents in this room, administration, everybody involved. It's a community effort. And when there's a framework that people can relate to and pieces that people can relate to as a classroom teacher who's not an expert in guidance or in social work, that there's something that they can look at and say, okay, this is the technique that I'm going to use in this particular moment when there's a social emotional emergency or a social emotional moment, that I know exactly what to do and how to handle that. It's intensive training. I had to bring teachers in at like lunchtime, day in, day out. We did circles, and it was this whole thing. And when there's something erupted, there was something in place. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about a program. I'm not talking about buying something and following rules A to Z. I'm saying there's a framework. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
I just want to add that framework improves climate, and climate is something in our schools that we've been talking about, that the administration and this board and its predecessors have done a great job in taking serious steps to improving and measuring and understanding the climate. But the climate of the schools and the framework and the way you develop that affects the needs and the duties of all the staff that are involved with SEL or mental health or crisis.
Are we on the same page or no?
I think I'm not so sure. Like, I think we could keep going. We're hearing you. I'm hearing the concerns. I'm hearing the questions. I think now it's our job to go back, right? Like, that's what he's doing. That's the process.
It's not to say that I don't want to support. I strongly think that we do need a social worker, by the way. But
So we can have discussion and debate about the approach and the methodology to getting there, whether it appeared in a prior budget year presentation or not. And, Raina referenced, the decisions that were made that led to that. And there's some things that appear year after year, and there's things that are new each and every year. So when we think about that, when we're talking about measuring and looking to grow programs, we presented the guidance program with the board support, just as we're presenting this program last year. And if you're having second thoughts about that, well, that's something that to be processed all the way around. But when we think about measuring progress and programs and growth, that's why we built a program assessment model. And when we're looking at bringing in new things, it's that commitment to beginning to measure and evaluate things. Dave, I heard feedback specific to particular things of areas of disappointment that you conveyed. But at the same time, when I look to our classrooms, when I think of the teachers in our schools every day, when I look at my administrative colleagues across the room, we could go on for many hours talking about the spectacular things that have been done and the things that how our schools have transitioned. And I don't say that to be confrontational with you. I say that in support of the good work that happens in our schools every day and the amazing teachers and administrators that we really have there. There's always room for improvement, always room for growth, and I just don't want that feedback to stand out there alone if someone was to capture that. And I'm not saying that you're taking it as such. I wasn't making it a Chris and Dave conversation. I needed to say that to be able to support my colleagues. So just as we heard feedback related to world language, there's feedback here, and we need to be able to consider what that looks like and feels like. And Debbie referenced the idea of the position that you feel that the board has been put in. And I hear that, and I have empathy for that, and that I think, as Raina said, that was not something that was intentional. But that's probably an outgrowth of how we feel in our schools each day when we look at the needs that are present and the feelings that we have when we have concern and care for our students.
So there was a motion that came out there, and it wasn't meant to leverage or position a consideration or put the board in any particular spot. It's just something that we believe in, and we're following through with a similar approach that we look to implement this year. And as Raina referenced before, it's something that we're growing and building. But I'm hearing something different from the board, and it's something for us to reflect on at this point.
I think we certainly want to hear, and I admire of our staff and administrators and faculty the passion that you bring, but we also need the context. We're lay people, except for the gentleman over there, and having it broken down for us, because the numbers are helpful, but we need the context to understand them to support that.
So,
but
yeah.
I still want to ask, I mean, if Gail, if you'd like to step up. I mean, you hear it shouldn't be simply an emotional appeal. We'd like to hear.
Wait, I want to ask Gail a very specific question. We got this chart with the different numbers on it. Can you explain this chart? Because I feel like I'm on a different island from the rest of you guys, because I see this differently.
And then there's this that follows it, by the way.
Are these 146 different cases of student support needs? I'm just using one of the examples. Or is this like...
You should use this one.
I cannot say that there may not be crossover in our data. I think when you look at each category, which is on the next slide, and the explanation around each category, I think it's very hard to quantify the work of what a social worker does. But I want to talk to the points about what's social emotional curriculum versus the role of a social worker in our river towns, and I have spoken to some of our colleagues. The social worker is a wraparound approach to student learning. It is not just what is going on within the classroom, within the school building. This is across home, 24/7, 365 days a year. So today alone, one email that we received took 4 hours of time to make a plan, to investigate, to be able to support that child and family and school through the course of the day. So when that child went home, that child was safe. So it's very hard to be able to, and I'm not trying to come from an emotional place, that's a pure fact. When you look at 4 different categories, there can be crossover. I think of 3 families in the last week that maybe those data points do crossover. But when you're seeing an increase in numbers, it's for 2 reasons, I think. I think our needs across our country have risen. We also are being very cognizant of supporting student needs and family needs. And when you have the gift of a social worker, it does open doors to that. And that is our fact right now. We know our demographics.
But what do the numbers mean?
But it's very difficult, and I'm speaking to our colleagues, to be able to quantify each of those categories. And we might all look very different, but she does each one of those categories.
But what do the numbers mean? I think that was the question, right? The number, like it says, so, can you go back to that slide? Yeah, thanks. So student support needs, 15-16, Dow's Lake, 22 students require student support needs. Then that jumped by 59 cases in 17-18, and year to date, we're doing much better. We're on better pace, it seems. But a couple things, right? What are those numbers? That means that 81 students last year required student support needs.
Direct from the social worker as opposed to potentially your psychologist.
But is that just like a tally mark? Like, what does the number mean? Does it mean that they required, I mean, that's what you're asking, right?
Yeah.
Like, what was the need, support? Like, I know that's a much deeper.
What is the support? Like, to me, is this 81 different situations? This is what I'm asking. Yes, I understand that there could be crossover, but just using 17-18, that 81 number at Dow's Lane, was that 81 different cases of student support?
Yes.
Okay. That's what I was asking.
I have a question, Ms. Krieger. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand something. So, Gail. Okay. I call you Miss Gail? So when we look at student support needs and collaboration, which have the highest numbers in 17-18, and we compare it to family support, outreach, and crisis, and the bigger numbers seem to be skewed towards Dow's Lane, but of course, there are 4 grades there. Well, let's not get into that. That's getting a little too crunchy.
What does it mean?
Yeah, well, all right. So I just wanted to ask, student support needs and collaboration. If we look at those 2 subgroups of how you look at the social worker consideration for key areas, are those 2 more likely to involve the social worker dealing with staff within the school buildings as compared to the other 2 categories that are more associated with work outside the school buildings? And student support.
Collaboration is with school personnel, whether it be teachers, administrators, where family support and outreach are predominantly outside agencies.
Okay, and what about student support needs?
That's direct student.
Oh, say that again?
Direct student contact.
Direct student contact, okay. Thank you.
I think they're waiting for you.
Yeah.
Well, I was hoping to hear from other administrators, if anybody wants to step up. I mean, obviously, this is a challenging question for the board to decide upon. And I really appreciate what was shared at our round table in January, and we can all go back and watch the tape on that.
So, first of all, thanks for the chance to speak a little bit about this. I think it's really important to note that our social worker does something that there's nobody else in this district or any district that does, that is tasked to do. And this is, again, this idea about emotion. I think any budget proposal has some element of emotion, right? Because all of our work involves children. So we are all emotional about our children, emotional about the opportunities that we provide them. We're emotional about the programs that we want them to have. We're emotional about the support that they may need or that we may see them seeking out or in some cases crying out for. So I will try to keep emotion out of it, but I also will say that when I think about the work of a social worker, and Gail referenced a particular situation today, that the role of the social worker is less to implement a program that's in place in school, although certainly a well-defined social program includes that, than it is to make sure that a student that is in our building is available to learn, is safe outside of the school, and that any level of support that can be put into place to meet the needs of that child and or their family or as an extension of that child are brought to bear. So that involves, getting an outside agency involved. That involves being available and connecting with a family at, 8, 9 o'clock at night on a Friday night, as is the case from time to time given the circumstances. That involves making a home visit to ensure that the environment to which a child is going is safe, or that an intervention that's being put into place is actually being applied. And that involves making the connections for our families who are struggling to make those connections themselves. And so in the meeting that I had today with our social worker, we sat and we went down the list of 3 to 5 different outside programs that might be appropriate, or outside interventions that might be appropriate for the need that was presented by this child, by this email that Gail referenced earlier. It was an hour of my time in working with the social worker. As Gail said, it was half the day for the social worker. That's one of those check marks on the board. Look, I don't know what the right number of events or the right way to characterize that data that we have is. What I can say is that in the course of my time here, in the course of 10 years in Irvington, I can tell you that the level of need has risen for the outside support that a social worker brings to bear. I can also say that we went through a period of time where we had someone in that role and then had no one in that role. And the need to bring that level of support back was stark. So it is with great appreciation that we have reached the point that we have. What we realize is that like a lot of other places, we're seeing the need for more. And that's where this proposal comes from. I can't speak to why it was or wasn't, in there last year. I think the fact of the matter is, we see proposals, as they come along, and sometimes it's the right time and the critical mass is there to make that proposal, and sometimes it's another year down the road. I wouldn't want to judge the value that we place in something or the need that we see for something based on the fact of whether it was proposed in a prior year. Okay, so I'd ask you to consider that. Thank you.
I mean, would they, an ask be, I mean, it sounds like we're trying to quantify what's an appropriate caseload for a social worker.
That feels a little weird to me, because I
Yeah.
feel like we're not experts
Yeah.
to say that.
But I don't think the caseload issue is very real. If we were basing the decision based on just the caseload alone, I think it would be a very clear decision, right? Like, it's a heavy caseload, in any, by any measure.
So then what's the issue?
For me, the issue is very simple. Again, it's not complicated. It's when you bring, the stuff that Mr. Sotal just addressed, a lot of the strategies and those things live within the framework. Whichever one, doesn't matter, but all of those things that the social worker does live within a framework. And it's not just for the social worker's benefit. It's for the rest of the school community's benefit that doesn't do social work.
So are you saying we have a social worker now, if they name that framework and they tell you,
I'm
that's
all
the
in.
ABC framework
For me,
we're
I'm all
using
in.
right now,
That's right.
here's the evidence that
David
her
Graeber, yes.
workload
Yes.
is, because to me, I look at this, like when the ask was for the school psychologists, we had, X amount of school psychologists, the cases have grown exponentially, they need another set of hands, and so we approved as a school psychologist. To me, now, since, you've provided us with the, information and kind of more of an overview of exactly her role, but what has come clear to me from the roundtable and previous comments is that she is overloaded, the need is there. You want a name to the framework, I don't need a name to the framework, I feel like the need is there, we need another social worker. I mean, I feel like it's just.
Yeah, I think, and with due respect, I think that's short-sighted.
Okay.
I think we need to go deeper there. I think if we want to build lasting change, it's a big problem. Like we've said, it's a huge problem nationally. It's like a big deal, and I don't know that anybody's just equipped to just kind of like, let's charge into the battle. Like, there are proven reasons, just like we would do with anything else. This is kind of what I'm, like, with any other ask. So for me, like, it's very clear, we will benefit, the students will benefit. For me, the framework is less about the social worker, his or herself, and more about the, like I think you really pointed out, it's about the culture of and the climate of the school communities that this person is going to serve. So that, because again, social emotional stuff does not happen, I think, again, it doesn't happen in a bottle. It doesn't happen in a vacuum. So if a kid is sitting in a classroom and there's something happening, and that teacher is equipped to work within this framework, again, please don't, but this ties very closely to professional development. When a staff is professionally developed around strategies that live within this framework, now you've got a staff of, how many people do we have on staff? Over 100, 200 people? You've got 160 people that can support this guidance social worker now in a really powerful and interactive way. So that's really what I'm saying. I'm not, so for me, again, it's very, very simple. If there's a framework that our district will buy into that will support the whole social emotional learning approach, that ultimately down the road ties into an academic piece as well, which it does, but we can talk about that another time. The idea for me is very simple. If that thing is named, and it's something that we are going to look, really dig into as a community, I have no problem.
Do you want to go? And for me, likewise, the framework, whether it's a program, not a program, I'm not sure of the word choice, but I agree with Dave. I also feel that if you're going to hire the social worker, I need to see how it fits into the entire picture. Where do the guidance counselors fall? Where's the student advisor fall? How does I ask come into it? How does K-5 counselor come into it? Who do they report to? And most importantly, how do we as community members know who to call? I mean, I would like to think, if we have a social worker, is there like a chart, like a flow chart that tells somebody, oh, I have this crisis going on in my home, or I need to talk to a teacher, I should expect that the social worker is going to walk in. I'm looking programmatically as to how this individual hire fits in, and that's what I would have thought I would have.
So the piece that maybe frames this is RTI. So we have a system, RTI, MTSS, we have a system. RTI is our intervention. So I think early on, I don't know, about a while ago, I think I referred to Tier 1. So there are Tier 1, and that means all students have access to Tier 1. And Tier 1 is the learning that we expect for all students. So whether that's through the health curriculum, whether that's through our guidance counselor, our counselors going into classrooms, whether that's through work of our psychologists, Tier 1 can happen with any of these people. And that really is the implementation at the building level and done differently at each building. But RTI is a system that we have in place in all 4 buildings to varying degrees and in varying ways. So response to intervention is not only about academics. Response to intervention has a social emotional component to it. So I think that one of the pieces, and maybe Gail, you said this, is our social worker is an interventionist. So where that social worker is, it's not just random, like, oh, Raina's having kind of a bad day today, let's call Gina. For the most part, our social worker is fitting into our RTI framework in all schools. So as a situation escalates or is identified or a need is identified and we're collecting data, and every one of our schools is collecting data for our RTI approach, that the social worker, as well as possibly the psychologist, as well as our counselors, are layering in to support different needs. So if a student is struggling outside at recess, so I would guess that if that child came through the RTI process, most likely now that we have an elementary counselor, that would probably be something that you would ask the counselor to do an intervention with. That might be a small group, that might be a one-on-one. But if through the RTI process you're identifying attendance issues or you're identifying high levels of anxiety that maybe are related to some family situations going on, which could be a crisis situation, could be chronic. It also could be that there's a sibling in another building who's having a problem, and all of a sudden we're starting to see the child in Main Street School is all of a sudden not present for learning. So, Joyce or the teacher brings that child to the table. Well, lo and behold, it turns out that there are some really serious issues going on, maybe with a sibling at the middle school, the high school, Dow's Lane. It could be, sadly, an illness in a family that's creating that anxiety. So it could be a lot of different things. Well, if that's the case, then the building administrators or the RTI chairperson is going to layer in the social worker into that type of a setting, not to create an intervention for recess play. So the purposes of, interventionists, I think the best thing that we've done in terms of our growth as a school district is the implementation of RTI, is that we're using data to make those decisions. So our social workers are interventionists. The good news, I think, is that in all of our buildings, we see our interventionists also in proactive, and that's the Tier 1. So we would expect our social worker, yes, to be implementing whatever program we're doing. We would expect our social worker to be part of that. But they are an interventionist just like our ELA, our reading specialists, and our math specialists, and our psychologists at times, and our guidance counselors at times. So I don't know if that gives you sort of yet another perspective of that is the framework, response to intervention. And that is the role, and that's how it's not random that, except in crisis, I just want to keep that category as its own category. Crisis is, oh my God, we have a situation and we're calling Gina. But when not in crisis, those other categories are developed through a response to intervention framework. That is the system.
All right, so I think we got a lot to chew on with that. In terms of other areas that we could discuss, I know that you have some reports that have been shared with us about Amplify and about technology. Is that something that we could just put out there for the
No, we can absolutely publish more information on the subject.
And are there questions in those other areas, or, I think... we certainly have the opportunity to discuss more at our next meeting. I think we've spent a lot of important time talking about the
No, I just
topic
think
areas.
if Amplify will have a public-facing presentation for the public, I think it's very important for the public to see the report on the rollout of it, the pilot of Amplify. I think it's extremely important.
I want to back that up. Even if it's not an official board meeting or whatever it is,
Yeah.
there's some way for that, that work that you did to show to the community, because it's really powerful and positive and strong, and I think will help a lot in framing this picture for us as a whole, right? Because even though it's not such a huge chunk of the line, it's still important.
Okay.
Bless
Any other topics we want to delve into, or we can open it up to the community for feedback?
Wish we could hire 2 music teachers. Joke.
On the music teacher piece, I thought the presentation was very helpful to try to understand how that's going to fit in. I like hearing that we're going to replace a strings teacher with a strings teacher, which is wonderful. And I like the idea that you're going to focus on the elementary school age students and, the approach. So I appreciated that part of the presentation and agree with it.
Yeah. I mean, we will definitely, we have an additional opportunity to weigh in at our next meeting. So if we think we've asked the questions that we need to ask, I'd ask if we can turn it over to those who've been so
Patient, yeah. I definitely want to do that. I mean, the only thing I do want to return to, I mean, when you look like, when we start the presentation, you always shake the tree and see, what money is out there in terms of savings so that we can possibly use it this year. And I've raised in the past transportation cost and the escalating cost, and I know that it's late and the hour's late, but at some point I would like to return to that unless you want to speak to it now. But my personal questions really revolve around looking at last year's 2018 superintendent's budget for transportation and looking at some of the notes that were made as to increased bids, $125,000 last year. But each year when I look at transportation, we're going up $100,000. And I really think as we really should at some point talk about that and try to better understand it so that, one, the community understands how our costs are increasing. And when you look at special ed transportation and private school transportation, I don't see the number of students increasing, so ridership doesn't seem to be going up. So I think if we're adding, like it's suggested in this budget, another $75,000 or whatever the number was for monitors, I think we also have to talk about that.
It's not really that we're adding it for monitors, there's a bid, there's different bids and contracts that we have with our transportation, and that they want to rebid the monitor contract. So, or use one of our existing contracts, the monitor price that's in it. It's very complicated. I can get you some more information. I'm actually worried that I'm not budgeting enough in transportation at the moment. So that's why I did add some extra money for that. And as far as, it's not always so simplistic to say that, it's a cost per student on a bus for special ed or private schools. We combine our students with 3 other districts, Dobbs Ferry, Hastings, and Ardsley, for special ed runs and for private school runs. So if, for example, we have 2 kids going to one school, two from our district that are going on one school, the cost of that bus might be $60,000, and we pay $60,000. If we combine that same trip, one of our students and one of Hastings' students, then it's $30,000 for us. So it really, because then it's $30,000 for them. So really, it depends on the mix of kids, where they're going, how we can route them, and every year it's a different animal because it's how kids live and where they go to school. And what I've been doing is carefully taking the combined quad district billing and looking at which one is a special ed run, which is a private run, just so I can get a handle on it. But it is really different every year, so it's not necessarily per student that you could measure that, because it also depends on students in the other districts. One of the things we are trying to do is try to get more neighboring districts to see if we can't pull them into the quad for at least some of the special ed or private school runs, to say, hey, you may have a kid going to Ursuline that you're, like, say, Terrytown or Elmsford or Greenberg. Can we take that kid to Ursuline for you and then lower our cost? So we've been working on trying to expand the quad for that area, because the time on the bus wouldn't be that much more. We still have to be sensitive to time on the bus as well, though.
Mhm. But I mean, I can appreciate how complicated it is, but I'm really behooving this board to look at transportation. And when I look at 2017, 2018, and we're spending $2.2 million, and then 2018 to 2019, we're spending $2.4 million, so we've gone up $200,000 there. And then now again, this year, we're going up another $100,000. This is an area where which, if I understand it correctly, is for special ed and private school transportation that is less than 150 students at best. So there's 50 special ed students and at best 75 private school students.
No, I'll give you the exact numbers.
I know
There's
we've
more.
asked for ridership,
Yeah.
but the number that we're approaching now to transport that small number of students, I would think that as a board, we really need to look at that and come up with some creative ways in order to try to reduce these numbers. And hearing it's complicated, I can imagine how hard you work on this. But also hearing that, like in this budget, we have an increase in monitor cost, and that's another $76,000.
It's not just all monitors, it's monitors and also current riderships. When I look at what we're currently spending this year, we're pretty much at or over budget at the moment. So it's really a reflection of more of the push ahead that I needed to change that number. Because when I did the first presentation, that was January. So it's an evolving number, and I can get you some more details, but it is a very risky area right now in terms of we are at the bus company's mercy in a lot of these contracts. There are not enough drivers. If you rebid a contract, you're subject to getting a worse rate than you have now. So a lot of times we're looking to continue with an existing contract and maybe rebid a portion of it, and that's what they're trying to do with the monitors right now. And when you look at what the monitors are making on these buses right now, they're significantly under market in our current contract.
And I sincerely mean, I know nobody knows this better than you do, so I am not doubting that the numbers are correct. I'm just concerned that as a board, we may have to revisit providing busing. I mean,
We don't really have, we have an obligation to provide transportation to private school students.
I
so
understand, but in terms of other aspects of transportation, trying to lower the cost, and whether we're obligated to do it in one area and not another, or certain grades and other grades. But the numbers to me, if you really stop and look over the last 5 years, we're approaching a point at which even I thought you were going to say, we're just going to go higher. And we're at the mercy of these bus companies. And we talked about we can't buy buses because there's nowhere to park them. So at some point,
But that is on the table right now. We're asking Ardsley if they can. We're asking if we could look at Terrytown, who has a bus fleet. We're looking at every avenue because of the way the market is for buses right now. It is really tough. Yeah, I mean, the only other thing we can do is increase time on the bus. So, I mean, we can go up to 90 minutes. As the state says, you can have a child go on a bus up to 90 minutes. You can use public transportation. There are some other alternatives.
Yeah, and I also
They're ghastly, but we can do it.
Right, and if we could offer, possibly going back to look at whether we can offer incentives for those who don't sign up for the bus. You never know.
Okay. I think it's been an endurance contest, but if you're still here, we welcome community comment, this time for the grown-ups. And we ask you to share your name and speak for ideally less than 3 minutes so that we can give everybody a chance.
3 minutes? Should be able to beat that.
Some people have their own rules, but that's what we ask.
Okay.
And I'm the timekeeper.
I'm Allison Wagesback, 3 Emory Road. I am on the PTSA Executive Committee, but I'm actually putting on my Heads Up Rivertowns hat right now. Heads Up Rivertowns is a new committee that we started in the fall of 2018 to help Irvington and the neighboring villages become screen smart communities. And part of our mission is to help move that goal into the Irvington schools. And I would like to thank the board and the administration very much for their thoughtful budget, especially the part about the one-to-one in middle school and rolling that up into high school. And I wish Raina hadn't left the room because I wanted to just mention it's so unfortunate. I always hate this meeting every year where you have to talk about what needs to go and what needs to stay and arguing the merits against each other of should we not get the devices so we can have the foreign language teacher and should we not have the social worker? And I mean, it's a very tough position that all of you are in. But in terms of what Heads Up Rivertowns has done a lot of research and processing around the topic of the connection between technology and mental health. And what has been overwhelming is the connection between access to social media, more time on your smartphone, and depression and anxiety rising in this country across all ages, but especially for teenagers, the developing brain. So while it seems a little counterintuitive that we would be like super excited about every kid walking around with a Chromebook, the reason that we are is because right now what's being used in the classroom is cell phones, and they are being used prolifically in classrooms. And not only are they being used for schoolwork, but they're also being used for group chats and Snapchat and news alerts and Instagram and all those other things that we all know as adults distract us all the time. So feel free to go to our website if you want more information. We have tons of articles, but I just wanted to thank the board and the administration for their commitment to rolling out a one-to-one program. We really believe that it is vital to the mental and emotional and also academic health of our students, that it is not just more technology for the sake of technology, but really it's teaching them how to manage technology so that it's not managing them. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hi, Tanya Hunt. I just want to echo thanks. This board has presented some really thoughtful, insightful comments about this budget, and these decisions I know personally are not easy to make or to even contemplate. So I really appreciate your work and your sharing your thoughts around some of these proposals. I wanted to echo a little bit about particularly what Deb said about how does the social worker fit in. I mean, doing the work that I do as one of the co-chairs of IASC, it's extremely clear that there's a need to support the social emotional things that are coming up with our students at all grade levels. I think having that a picture of the continuum of care that we currently provide in our district for social emotional needs would be helpful for parents and the community, and you know, even those of us who are really involved and have been involved for many years sometimes maybe aren't quite aware of, you know, how does it look when a need comes up? You know, what kinds of needs does the psychologist address versus what kinds of needs do the guidance counselors address versus what kinds of needs does the social worker address? And then, of course, the student assistance counselor, which I ask funds a day for, you know, that relates specifically to substance abuse issues and prevention, education, and that sort of thing. But I think having that whole picture is what is needed when you're trying to figure out, okay, you're asking for another position, and how does that position fit in? As Deb said, you know, what does it look like when you add that? Not to discount in any way the need, because you know, we talk about it all the time in IASC, and we see it all the time in CAB, and you know, the teenagers are talking about the stresses that they're under, and you know, Raina mentioned earlier, you know, that powerful you know, story on CBS this morning, and it is like you know, we have kids like that, and so anyway, important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey there, Nick Eisenlau. I just wanted to put in 2 cents in terms of the foreign language approach. I just would urge the board not to let kind of the perfect get in the way of progress on this. Certainly the value system, you know, for the community, I think, has shifted in this direction, and that there are probably trade-offs and sensitive to the idea, you know, that the teachers have in terms of time in terms of scholastic work and the requirements the state puts on them, and to look at the other programs around the community and other parts of Westchester and other parts of New York that have implemented in particular the FLES program. There's a lot of evidence that early age foreign language is beneficial across a variety of learning domains, and it's something that I think is really important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
My name is Irene Burgos. I have a kindergarten and a fifth grader. And I want to echo the support for the world language. My kids are bilingual, and they have been, and it's a struggle to make them bilingual because it's tough for kids, if they speak a different language and other kids don't. But I think in our family it's been extremely beneficial, and it's made both of my children sort of, their learning be more expansive, not narrow. And so I think for them, if they have other children who are speaking other languages and are open to it, I think culturally it helps us as a community. And I myself learned a lot of languages, and I think having learned Spanish at a very young age helped me sort of later learn Portuguese and French and helped me in my travels. And I think for our children, it's a very important thing to learn early on, because I think if you wait until later, I think, you end up having kids who maybe can read Spanish or read French, but, go to France and be able to speak it is something that I don't think they'll be able to do. But so for me, and in our own family, learning it earlier and exposing all of our kids to it, I think can only help them. So I want to echo that sort of, let's not let the perfect get in the way, because if we, I know that this has been bounced around several years, so if we sort of keep bouncing into the next year and the next year, I don't think we'll ever do it, right? There's always going to be things that compete. So I personally think if we don't start some way, we're not going to ever get to it. So I hope you guys, consider that, and I was happy to see support for that tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Eric Oley. I just want to say how impressed I am with the work that the elementary world language people have done. I've seen this advocacy grow over the last couple of years, and I think it's just fantastic. And to see all these people support this is fantastic. I have an 8th grader and 10th grader. I wish this initiative was around when my kids were in elementary school. And I would like to say, I think it really just comes down to priorities. Sort of what Dave was saying. Obviously the kids can have a full schedule right now, but what are the priorities of the district? I see the number of $56 million, and that's the ask that you make on this community in terms of taxes. And do we want that reflective in our participation in what our kids are actually learning in school? And I think learning a language, a second language as a young person is incredibly valuable to kids, and I've seen it I have cousins who live in foreign countries, I have nieces and nephews who live in foreign countries, and it's a wonderful thing, and I think it really helps their learning, and studies have shown that. So I really appreciate that the board is asking questions about this, and I really wish you consider putting it back into the budget. And I think it's easy to have an ask for a 1.0 position, and I think hopefully you can find the money for that. And then remembering the budget, the bond proposal, where if you're adding to implementing the LED conversion, where you could save $100,000 a year immediately, because you wouldn't need any sort of state recommendation on that. So you could actually put that money in right away. If the bond passes this year, you could have $100,000 next year to use towards a curriculum event. And this could be the language program. So I think if you could easily cobble together a 2.0, 2 different positions for that $150,000 in the coming years, if we just make it a 1.0 position for this coming school budget year. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bonjour. Je m'appelle Rebecca Pelletier. Je parle français un peu, and that's all I've got. 6 years of French, straight A's. I'm a geek. I'm very academic, but let me tell you something. That's the best I can do with my French, because I started too late. Okay, I just want to put that out there. The evidence is there. right? There's data, there's research, there's passion. There's a lot of people that care about this. And I've been in the school districts in Westchester for the past 2 years, about 4 different school districts. And I love what I'm seeing on how they're incorporating this global citizen initiative and how they're incorporating language and cultural studies. And I'm really inspired by it. And I think that we should be at the forefront, and we shouldn't be scared of it. We can find room in the budget. There's enough people up there who are thinking big, and I love it. And I think that it's been 3 years, and they've been doing a lot of hard work, and I know we can figure it out. And I also know that it doesn't necessarily have to stress a teacher out to have a special. A lot of times that's when teachers can regroup and figure out their next steps for the day. I've been in districts where 3rd graders have 5 specials. I've been in districts where they have 3. You know, I see how it can work in different situations. So keep working on it. I feel inspired. I see a lot of positive energy. And au revoir.
Merci. Je vous invite à parler à les enfants qui sont au collège et au lycée parce que
Je parle français un peu,
les
un peu,
enfants
un peu,
apprennent
un peu.
les langues très bien.
Perdu
Merci.
mon casquette dans la main.
Dios mío.
See.
So I got.
Hi, I'm Erin Bernstein. I have a. I know. You can't time me. You didn't do it to anybody else.
I did to
oh, you did. Oh, I did. I
you
missed it.
told her, wrap it up.
Okay, this
so,
doesn't count. Okay.
I'll restart.
I am obviously reset me. Oh my God, I lost my train of thought now. I'm Erin Bernstein. I'm the parent of a 3rd grader at Dow's Lane, and everyone knows I'm here. I'm a huge proponent of early foreign language. I was so impressed by the conversation that went on today. I do want to make one comment. In prior meetings, I thought I heard that we were going to use the library special time to implement foreign language because we were going to open the library up all day so that classes could move in and out of the library as it was needed to supplement and complement the curriculum and the lesson plans for that particular classroom. I think that's an amazing idea. I think it seemed to get a lot of support. So are we still planning on eliminating library time? And if we are, what would replace it? Or are we keeping the old model? I don't know if anyone wants to answer that or if that eats into my time. Or you can get back to me. The other thing I want to say is I think Dr. Harrison used the term low-hanging fruit. That's my favorite finance term. And we keep focusing on all the ads in the budget. There's $62 million of other spending, and I would guess there's $25,000 in each school that we could find to cover $100,000. I'm putting on my finance hat. If we had to, I think we could find $25,000 through LED lights, through looking at the technology spend. I'm all for the Google Chrome books. I love the idea of limiting screen time for kids on their personal devices. However, when you look at the spend on Google Chromebooks, it's not just the $87,000 ad. It's the $77,000 that moved from line, 210, 462. Carol, you know those codes better than me. To what? Right, and as Stephanie said, there's money in the PTSA might be able to fund that. Sorry. And then the other thing even to look at, I'm going to throw out the wildest idea, and this actually would impact me. I'm curious what ridership is for the high school buses, and could we eliminate it maybe for 12th grade, 11th, 10th, 9th, and that would impact me. So I'm saying something that would personally impact me. I live in East Irvington. So I put my money where my mouth is, so to speak, and I think it's something just to think about, ponder. Maybe it wouldn't work. What were my other things? Oh, and then with the social worker, I do have the same questions. What is the capacity? Could we do a half an FTE next year to see what the capacity is and how that might work, and then roll that out? And obviously, we've sent letters to the district. I'm a huge proponent. I love that phrase, Nick. Let's not sacrifice perfection for progress, or sacrifice perfection for whatever. I don't know what you said now because I'm under a time limit. But I think if we don't start this now, we're never going to start it. And if we don't start this now, we're not going away. So you'll be annoyed by all of these comments for future meetings. So, don't hurt yourself.
Thank you. And I would say if it does stick around, we still need you to stick around. Either way.
Hi, Della Lenz. A little distraction from world language, which doesn't impact me personally, but I do have community members that I support dearly and their children with foreign language. But I'll skip the rest of it because these ladies are waiting for the same. I know that I've been very persistent with this, and please excuse my persistency, but I asked the district and the board to consider providing more details on the spending. This would assist the stakeholders in understanding how our tax dollars are spent, and maybe we can give you better feedback on what we think maybe could be considered for cuts. I also ask again for the board to attach the documents to be discussed at the BO meeting. And one thing with the bond, I have two more things. One thing with the bond is also asking the board to consider if we're having difficulty maintaining our facilities. I know that in the last bond, we put a lot of maintenance into the last bond, and with this bond, we're putting a lot of maintenance into another bond. It wasn't the intention of New York State's building a 5-year buildings and grounds maintenance plan. So I just asked the board to just be future thought and seeing how much we're putting into maintaining our facilities, and are we putting enough? My other thing was with the social emotional piece, and I agree with you, David. We have to have a program, and we also have to look at, is that program effective? I know that, and I sent the board an email. Over the last 7 years, $400,000 has been spent on the student counselor. What is effective for our kids? I know back in 2016, a letter from David Cohen came out that we were switching from suspending kids to community service, which I didn't know about, until I happened across David's letter from back then. Which was effective? Is suspending students helping children? Is it harming children? Have we looked at different options? Are we truly supporting the social emotional piece of our children, and what is suspended? What is effective for our kids?
It's just a point of clarity. I'm not familiar with the communication that was referenced with community service.
I'll forward you the email back from David. It was from years ago, and I was actually doing a search on my email, and that's happened because there's so many emails that come from the district. I don't read them all. I think I forwarded it. Did I forward that to the board? I'll forward that because it was in a bunch of attachments. So, but also analyzing if the programs that we're currently implementing to support the students, are they actually effective? So, thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Yasana Sorrell. I just would like to start with the argument that Dr. Harrison mentioned. It was regarding we should not divide early world language program into phases because of fear that it would be abolished if there were budgetary restrictions in later years. I have to say, I feel differently about this. I see it as an opportunity to actually expand it later if there is budget. I would love to see the flexibility that the administration has shown to PLTW in comparison. As we can see, it is possible, and I just don't understand why it's not possible with early world language. I think it's really about the priorities that the administration has, and I think that the administration has to realize that it's also the community that funds in a very large portion the budget, and the voices of the community should be heard. I know for a fact that the board received in one day over 50 emails of support. And we hope that you will bring us at least another program that will hopefully provide one teacher. I understand that it would be best to have French and Spanish teacher, but at the same time, if there are budgetary restrictions, we have to be flexible thinkers, and this is what we are teaching our children to be. And we would love to see the same flexibility, please, with early world language. Thank you very much. And this is regarding also a different point. PTSA and IEF have a lot of programs in our schools. And sometimes when we look at them, I can see that actually they take a lot of time away from the teacher's time. I wonder if there shouldn't be some kind of meeting of both organizations where they will together gather all the different programs that they are implementing and really consider if there is no certain overlap, seeing what kind of different, fields of interest they're covering. Because I really believe that there is also a lot going on, and sometimes maybe we need to take something out, and it doesn't have to be ELA or math. But I get a feeling that there's a lot going on, something else in schools that could help us release more time for the world language. Another issue, I'm sorry, one more minute, please?
No. Yeah, 30 seconds.
Oh, 30 seconds, okay. Busing, private busing. I just really cannot understand it, and I know this is by law, that we have to pay, the school district has to pay, for children to be bused to private schools. Does anybody know when this law came into effect?
I would say it's great that you're a member of the PTSA, because basically at the end of every budget year, it's called the Big Ugly, and there's all kinds of things that are thrown in that divert public school money to other uses, and it's important to stay engaged and write your state senator and your assembly person and say, don't do that, please.
No, I really strongly believe it. I mean, in this case, these are parents who do not need financial support. We have 10% of parents here in Irvington who do need support. But I believe parents who can send their children to private schools don't need it. So I really agree with what Deb suggested. Deb was saying maybe there's a way to communicate with the parents on a friendly way and explain how much of a burden it is on our budget, school budget. I mean, so we could be flexible again, right? I'm just throwing it out there, that's all. But I would like to also ask, I have one more thing here. Sorry, this is for Carol Stein. I'm so sorry, Carol. Last budgetary meeting, you mentioned that that PTSA should advocate for this, with the state to release, is that what you were saying? To release funding for technology. This is something that you mentioned during last meeting, and I wanted to just ask you more about this because maybe we can get involved. Is there something specific you meant by this?
Yeah, it's a Smart Schools Bond Act,
Okay.
and we can connect over that next week if you'd like, and I can give you more information about that.
That would be great if you got involved.
No, we're listening. We're really listening, and we are trying to help here. I mean,
So
believe
we
us.
give someone else let's
I'm
give
sorry,
everyone a
I'm done.
chance,
I'm
and then
really
if you
done.
wanna ask
Thank
more
you.
questions,
No, I'm
can.
done.
Thank you, Yasena.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Fonseca. I was up here before, very rushed. Hi, Michael. Nice to meet you again. Again, I am Vice President. I'm the PTSA Dow's Lane Vice President, but I speak on behalf of myself only. When I stood up here earlier to show support for EWL, I thought I was trying to convince the board of how strongly our community feels about this program, as evidenced by the stack of emails that you have in front of you, as well as the ones in your inbox. Now I realize that we're trying to convince the administration. So we will channel this community mandate to the administrators.
Well,
And-
Stephanie, I don't want to jump on you, jump on your words. You don't need to convince us. The conversation we had, it's a priority for us. It's not convincing. The board asked us to look at different models. We'll come back with different considerations for the next meeting. Voices have been heard. There's no question. The advocacy's been tremendous. Aaron Reyna's complimented the committee's work, your committee's work, for everybody's committee for how long now. We've heard you. We believe in it. It's trying to find a model that we can make work within the dollars we have available. So
Right.
that there's no convincing. It's a matter of how we can make all these pieces fit in the puzzle. So you're going to see us come back in 2 weeks with some ideas.
Will that mean that the community will receive the budget proposal? Because when I came up here this morning, it feels like forever ago, I didn't realize that EWL was cut because I was looking at a March 5th report. So when should the public expect?
We make it available as soon as we can.
Will it go out via email?
No. And we'll make it available as soon as we can.
Okay.
Yeah, you're able to find when they are made available on the board docs. So if you go to irvingtonschools.org, there's a button for board docs in the middle, and
No,
with
no,
the
I
meeting
know
and on
where
the
to
agenda.
find it,
Okay.
but the question is, when do I know that it's been posted?
Yeah. I won't speak for you too much other than to say that you see all the numbers involved, so it's, I think, a concern of putting out a document that hasn't been 100% vetted. So when it's ready, it's put out.
Right.
It'll be available in the morning.
No, I'm not even referring to this specific. I'm just wondering, is it always only available after the board meeting?
It really
starts?
depends on what the topic is, but because it's budget season and there's so many things that
And bonds
change,
and-
right, that change at the very last minute, I mean, that's why this is, generally, most documents are there 2 days before the meeting.
Yeah, I would say in the fall, when Ms. Kaur gives presentations around curriculum, those are generally finished at an earlier time because you've had a longer time frame to work on it, and so they're on board docs earlier. In this case, Carol Stein is doing tremendous work because, as you know, she just put together a presentation of our capital bond project a few days ago, and now is putting together this budget as well as handling a significant number of other things. So I just want to give kudos to the work you're doing because it's very impressive. Thank you. So we definitely are doing our best, but there's not
And
insignificant
plus, we don't have
work.
a district clerk, but we will starting tomorrow.
No, I
Presumably we vote to
apologize
approve
for
it.
my frustration. The reason that it's coming out that way is because if the proposal by the administration is not what the community would like to see, I would like the opportunity, or we would like the opportunity, to be able to respond to that. And that's why I was asking for timeline. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Debbie Nathan Fuchs. I have 2 kids in the middle school, and I have a really quick question about the technology devices line item. What is that breakdown for that? What is that the technology devices, the 87K?
Yeah.
Is that for Chromebooks, or the Chromebooks so that we're one-to-one, or what is it for?
Yeah, if we go back to the presentation from the last meeting, we actually detail that, how everything is broken out. So that is additional funds beyond what we had budgeted last year. So it's looking for additional monies to support that. So built into that, yes, it is Chromebook devices for all of our schools.
So that's part of it, but
Yeah.
that's not all of it?
That's part of it, yes. But there's other aspects to technology. If you go back to the presentation from the 5th, there's actually a slide that details each and every spend.
We were trying to figure, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you're going to ask a question, please go to the mic because this is recorded and people do watch it and they want to hear the question. Thank you. Okay. Well, we are, I think, a quarter of the way through our agenda, and certainly have additional opportunity for public comment if you stick around. But I will move us along. We have significant steps to take here with item 5.1.
We have a calendar.
Oh, we have calendar. Oh, my goodness. Good. All right, we have a calendar discussion. And, let's,
I don't think we have it. Where is it on the thing?
3.2.
No, but is it attached?
Where's the calendar?
Oh.
We don't have an attachment here.
File attached, I'm not seeing it. All right, well, it'll come up on the screen, I guess.
Yeah.
we don't have paper documents for the calendar? So I skipped ahead. We're actually on, we're not even a quarter of the way through. 3.2, presentation of proposed 2019-20 school calendar.
Why don't I have this? She puts disappearing like the slide was up. Hi again. So, as a quick overview, yes?
I guess we have to discuss it now.
Well, certainly want to continue the conversation because we do have a goal of adopting a calendar sometime soon so folks can be able to plan. But an overview of the calendar and many of the challenges that we seek to be able to accommodate each and every year requirements from SED, as well as accommodating contractual obligations, federal holidays, and certainly planning for inclement weather. That said, we've proposed a calendar this year that we continue to have dialogue about and seek to monitor, modify accordingly. And in this particular iteration, really not much has changed on this particular front. We have made a particular adjustment to the professional learning release days, PLRDs, as was reflected in the coming slide. But there was value in us in looking and spending some time having dialogue related to the understanding of PLRDs and the work that they bring to our schools. And when we think about this, there's some practical examples of the work that happens each and every day, event in our schools. And we've highlighted a number of these different areas. And we're looking at the work that's happened, next generation science standards, or the New York State Science Learning Standards, looking at the collaboration and departmental work that is occurring related to assessment in social studies, professional learning. We're looking at our teachers who have developed, reviewed, and revised unit planners throughout the course of these experiences. Our technology committee members have presented workshops to teachers on topics of interest related to using technology in the classroom. And additionally, we have seen this extend from one session to the next. Our specialist teachers have had dedicated time to be able to work together, work on their unit planners and other collaborative efforts. Our coaches, instructional coaches, have worked on standard-based work with all of our faculty at the elementary level. There's been a focus on using data and, of course, as I reference here, looking at writing assessments as well. There's been great opportunity for vertical articulation, and when I say vertical articulation, we're thinking grade to grade, moving up and down, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and to align learner outcomes and promote the continuity of instruction. And there's been also opportunities that didn't exist before during the school year when we think about our department area teachers being able to meet together. Here, the example that I provide is from special education, and thinking that there was opportunity for our staff to collaborate and identify opportunities for continuum of services. And when I sit here, and I actually almost want to back up 1 second, when we think about the continuum of services and the work that they've done there, that's work that not only impacts kids and identifying the needs that are present in our schools, but that work actually rolls forward and hits our budget process, and thinking of opportunities that we can better serve kids and looking at the array of services that we provide in our schools. So when we think about the benefits, I certainly don't want to read to you again, but there's real gains that we've seen for increased focus and momentum in the area of professional learning and collaboration, so continuity stands out. The extension of professional learning, again, is a theme that has been resonating with us as an administrative team when we think about teachers to really take their learning to a next level. So we've talked about the variety of consultants, the world language, that was a point of discussion this evening, that idea of them, the teachers, after they have time with their PD consultants, if we think of BART or Metamorphosis, that they're able to extend that work in planning and implementing learning based upon those other learning experiences. The reference to instructional coach work happens during those periods of time. Increase in technology integration through the PD that's been afforded to our teachers during these sessions. And of course, we think about learning and faculty meetings. So we have double blocks of time that occur on one of these days each month. So there's an opportunity to actually engage in a workshop environment, and then teachers turn to transfer that to their classrooms. So then we think about instances where it actually reduced teacher pullout, which has been a focus and a concern that's been discussed in this room on multiple times. We think of the work that's happened related to Amplify and the science learning standards. That actual unpacking of documents, the preparation for instruction, and some of the learning that's been provided has actually happened in PLRDs as opposed to pull-out time in the classroom. In special education, once again, there's been IEP writing, PD that's been provided, as well as work related to transition goals at the secondary school levels. We're looking at also professional learning for developing assessments and teaching into the block at the secondary level. And then we've also reduced pull-out for collaborative curriculum development. So now we're able to partner teachers, whether it's on grade levels or in departments, to be able to provide more opportunities for teachers to engage in that work. That said, we always know that there's opportunity for growth and improvement. As this was our first year, we're looking to grow with the experience and the model. And in doing so, we continue to seek opportunities to find more opportunities, again, I'm going to say, but to actually have a smoother system for our K-12 teachers or staff departments to be able to meet, because it gets complicated when we look at schools that operate on different bell schedules and different times of the day. So we're constantly looking to tweaking that. One of the pieces of feedback that we've received in this room as well, but it's been a conversation among the administrative team, has been looking at when we schedule the other events during the school year. So last board meeting, we had conversation about the days on which the actual PLRDs fell and trying to move some of them around holidays. But now we're also that consideration of when we schedule other events during the school year, such as conferences and school-based concerts and events that could have impacts here as well. That said, there's also been some conversation about what happens at the end of the year for elementary schools for early release, but we start by considering the frame for that and thinking about what happens in our secondary schools, that our faculty operate on an exam schedule that provides some greater flexibility than we see in the elementary schools. So there is a difference in structure and opportunities, but when we specifically think about the elementary schools, there's lots of needs that do occur, as we discussed last time. Bless you, that there's preparation and facilitation for all the different end-of-year events and programs and experiences, and we provide some examples. Grade level articulation is critical when we think about, again, that vertical articulation and collaborating to be able to share information and help plan for the next year and support students, but also between schools as students are moving in those transition years. And then when we think from a special ed standpoint, there's a need for case management work and transitioning students from grade to grade. Kindergarten preparation actually begins taking place at this period of time because we receive a great deal of information back from our screening process that takes place during registration. There's lots of examples of where data is collected and organized to be able to inform future work and to close out some of the experiences from the school year. And then last but not least, I can't ignore the packing of rooms that does have to occur. It may not sound like it's the end all and be all, but if you're a teacher who lives and works in that space for 180 days out of the year and someone comes in and moves into your room over the summer, or your room is dismantled for cleaning or maintenance, there's a great deal of time and concern that goes into that work. That said, when we look at our proposed calendar, you'll see that it appears to be quite similar to last time, but with one adjustment, as noted in the bottom of the screen, that there was originally a PLRD scheduled for October 2nd, which we moved based upon some public feedback to September 18th to move it away from the cluster of holidays that fall early in the month. Otherwise, the calendar largely remains the same. And then discussion tonight, and I keep moving the date on this last slide, so hopefully some approval on April 2nd.
Is there an end limit on when we, obviously before September? But,
obviously before September, sooner than later. I think
but
April 2nd
there's no
will be the
legal
latest.
date that we're obligated to?
There is not, but I think it's important from planning purposes. Transportation was a discussion. Transportation starts working on calendars. We think of our planning for next year. In April, mid-April, as an administrative team, we begin our planning process for all the events for next year that require scheduling and contracts and those details now. But realistically, at the end of the day, it's a planning and communication tool, so sooner the better, without question.
Someone like to ask a question related to the calendar?
Well, I'll jump in. My questions go back to last time in terms of what occurs on these days, and I really appreciate the summary of what was provided because it puts it into context. I had thought we'd be able, after having done this for 1 year, to hear more on a building-by-building basis what actually occurs on those professional learning days, either month by month, of Dow's Lane in October for the date that's given. At what point, as either in your department or our administrators, when are they actually scheduling this? 'Cause I think we're hearing from parents, they want to know what is being covered, because this is a burden, especially on the working parents, that they have to find childcare coverage. We don't provide it like some districts do. And they want more information. And for me, the first year was the rollout year. So having a general summary was more than enough, because you had to work, you know, in my opinion, I would have thought you'd want to work through it the first year. But to still receive what I feel is more of like an executive summary as opposed to a plan or something that shows building by building, as I give one example. I would think we'd be able to do that by now. So I'm just curious if when that does happen, is that something that can be shared?
Can you just clarify when you say
So
the first year, this is the first, isn't this the first year?
No, we did it last year.
No.
It's our first
Professional
year.
learning release.
It's our first year.
This is the first year.
We had it on the calendar last year. Professional learning release. Am I losing my mind?
No, we had it on the calendar, they're on the calendar for this current year,
Yeah.
you're saying.
Yeah.
So how many hours have we had, you guys? What number are we up to?
This year, it's not last year, but I mean the year we're in. Sorry. It's like we haven't had it this year. Where have my kids been going? Yeah.
So that's why, right, so.
Sorry, I meant this year in terms of we've had what, I don't know, however many months.
13,
Right, so
we've had 13 PLRD release
So
days.
going forward, after having 13, I'm curious, at what point are we able, do you think, if at all, that we could tell parents, either by building basis, what exactly is happening that day in their building that's taking the place of instruction?
I mean, our building administrators could, you know, they're planning them, they could tell you every one, like we.
No, but
we chart it. But how would you want to, like, I guess I'm just trying to understand, like, how that would be helpful. Like, what information do you want to know? Like, there are some days we did amplify science, so are you saying that it would have been helpful for Deb and Andrea to say, on this PLRD day, and I mean it, I'm really asking you seriously, what would be helpful?
Exactly what you just described.
What would be helpful is a professional development plan.
Can I please?
But that's not a plan, that part's not a plan.
Why is that not a plan? I mean, if this is on its face, professional development, right, it's professional learning, I'm curious as to what point, if any, and if you're saying that is not to be provided, that's the answer, but is there a point at which this ties into a professional development plan? I would think, if not, that's my first part of my question. But the second part is there a process, or is there something that your administrative group is saying that you're going to get to where the community knows in advance what's occurring on those days? If not, that's the answer. But I thought that's what I heard from the community, that they're looking to see on a building-by-building basis or some other way. I don't know how it looks or feels or fits, but what is occurring on those days that's not just part of possibly something on this list?
So I would say similar to what the board receives on superintendent conference days, we're given a schedule, what the different, whether it's a district-wide in it, like, you know, the district is doing this on the afternoon, this is what Daslade is doing in the morning, this is what Main Street's, kind of like that. What has been happening on these days?
Right, but I'll say Mr. Cohen just did something about teaching to the block, was in your newsletter just like 2 days ago, right? I think, yeah.
But is that asking
That was
too much?
superintendent's conference day, Dave, or that was a PLRD?
But Brain, I guess what I'm asking, is that are we asking too much? Is that something that's not going to be provided, or is that something that you plan to have provided?
It just hasn't been asked or put on our radar in exactly that way, I think.
Do you want to say, David?
Whoa. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Professional, buddy.
No, the idea of communicating to the community, Dave, is about specifically what was happening in that, and I didn't hear it in the way that Deb had just referenced it.
I'm not sure how to respond to that. I'm really not. I don't need a couple.
Yeah, count to 10 and then start.
I'm going to piggyback off you, Deb. Is that okay?
Go for it.
Professional learning release days is my experience that all schools, school districts, school communities have a professional development plan. We are being asked to vote on a calendar that is incorporating professional learning release days. Things that I believe in more than I think I've expressed over 150 times sitting in this room. Nobody stands behind professional learning more than I do. I think what this body is asking at least I know what I'm asking, and have been asking repeatedly for over 2 years, if not more. To hear that is upsetting,
Dave,
because the community's been involved in the discussion, and I don't think it's out of line for this body to ask for something that it's going to vote on to substantiate what goes on. I don't think a one-pager is a sufficient response. I think that if we want to approve something that we all believe in, that it's a very simple procedure, again, I'm using that word simple, to put together a professional development plan that says, for example, we know that our math teachers are engaged in professional learning throughout the year with Metamorphosis. When is that taking place? Is that every single learning release day? Is that every other Wednesday? When is that happening? A. B, what's happening in each of those sessions? Okay. C, what is the turn? Like, these are professional development plans. I mean.
That's separate from the
But in
specific
order
question
for
about
me
this.
to approve something to this effect,
So
we've asked and asked and asked and asked and asked and asked. And I'm at my wit's end.
Yeah, and I understand your frustration, Dave, and I would say, I think how I interpreted what Deb had said is different than what you stated just then. Deb spoke of communication to the community on a regular basis about what had happened in a particular PLRD or professional learning experience. That's what my response was too. But Dave, I listened. I'm asking please to have this similar consideration. So you have expressed your opinions over the years, and we have plans in place. Whether the plans that we have meet your personal level of expectation or not may be a different discussion to have. But if there's opinion that's growing from the board to look for a different type of product, our job is to satisfy that wish of the board and to communicate what those plans are. And then there's a balance of the level of what that support is. So if we're going to develop a professional development plan that's aligned with our goals, aligned with the work that's happening in our schools, that's our responsibility to do that, whether district level administrators, building level, and department level administrators. But the question that I have and the challenge that I have in processing what you said, and this is my reaction, so I apologize if it comes across the wrong way, that there's a point to it that to have a professional development plan, to be able to map out right now to say what's going to be happening on May whatever of next year would be premature in many ways. But to have overall objectives, and that is what I'm hearing you saying and what I'm expecting you to say. But I would pause if the board's approval on a commitment of professional development was associated with what was being named on particular days, because that would be administrative realm of board level discussion. So I think we're talking bigger level picture, right, of having expectation and setting wanting greater understanding of what our professional development targets are, which I think is reasonable. But I have pause about going further and thinking about the specifics of what they are being named now to be able to count. And maybe I went too far and misinterpreted some of what was said.
I think you did. It's a very simple thing. We're releasing parents, whether people believe me or don't believe me, all year and all year last year, many different parents from many different grade levels, and I wasn't the only one. What's going on during those days? What's happening? I have no answer. Metamorphosis, Bard, I don't know. This is going on. I've been asking for it for 2 years, Dr. Harrison and Chris. What I heard you just say is I'm the only person who's been asking for it, and I'm not really sure that that's the case. So with all due respect, I think there's a very clear correlation between providing a very comprehensive professional development plan, which is not out of the realm of the expectations of any school district, but it's in direct response to the community. The community is clearly saying, we are not happy with what's going on here, and they're also very willing to hear why it's necessary. And this board, I know, very much wants to support something that we feel is very necessary. And I think that it's the fact that we've been stonewalled for 2 years in receiving a professional development plan is beyond. And I gotta be honest. being as professional and respectful as I can, but it's ridiculous. But I'm asking for it again.
Could I just add briefly? I think that we had someone here at the last meeting, right, who really put words to what a lot of parents have said to all of us individually through this year. But the fact is, it's not just one person who said these things, and we've had pieces of a professional development plan, responses like a couple of slides here or a couple of slides there that list certain elements of this, but we keep, when we come on to topics like this, kind of bumping up against the fact that there's sort of a basic framework here that we're lacking to some extent. And so it may be coming up at this moment when we're discussing the calendar because we get asked about these PLRD days. But the overall feeling that we don't have a handle on everything that's happening in all of the schools, or that we don't understand it completely. It's not that we want to approve each individual day. We don't. But we do want to be able to speak in a way that helps the people who voted us in and the people who vote on the budgets to understand the need. And the need to do it on a monthly basis as opposed to every 3 months or whatever, taking a day and rather than, taking an hour here and there. And so I would just say it's not, what David is saying, he's not alone in it. We all come to this in different ways, but I'm coming to the same place where I feel like I don't fully understand, so I can't fit PLRD days in because I have never fully understood what's happening.
So, and I would just like to add to that, or maybe just wrap all this up. How's that? Got to wrap it up. I think for us it would be very helpful, similar to how you share superintendent's conference days. If you could go back just to help us understand what has happened this year so far, and using the example of the email that came out from the high school, I got a lot of really nice positive comments about that they were going to be working on the master block schedule, teaching strategies. So, it makes, parents are engaged. Parents want to know. So I think, some of that pushback, for example, on the master schedule was it felt like a vacuum. Parents didn't understand what was going on. So the more parents, if it's appropriate and going forward, I think it's a great idea if the different buildings could, let parents know what's going on. Again, I want to echo what Maura just said. We're not looking to say, yes, you should be doing that, or no, you shouldn't be doing that. We just need to understand what is going on, because we do get asked. And, we do get complaints, and that's kind of what happens when you're in this seat, and we just want to be able to articulate properly to the community what is going on.
And let me just add to that. Part of this comes to you not because it's your problem. It's every working parent's problem, right? We would all love to match, our school day to the work day and have it be 9 to 5 or whatever that is, that everything fits, but it doesn't. And we know who it falls to. It's going to fall to the primary care parent. And so, we want to know that you're just, that we can feel comfortable and that there's a communication to the parents who, I'm sorry, it's getting late. It's clearly a communications issue, because it's like, take take these release days, these early release days, but as long as people understand what it's about, they're not, the rationale and what you're doing, they're not going to have that same resistance. So it's about kind of going past the resistance and saying, well, it's needed, and this is how we best achieve it.
And the other component, really quickly, is well, but.
I was just about to say, what are you going to say? The other component is assessment. Yeah, say that. Scary when we can actually read each other's mind. So I was going to say, it is absolutely the reason, or at least I raised it initially, and I think we're hearing from a few others, is that we have a responsibility, I think, to convey when we think there's a communication ask from the community. And I think that's the first part of it, is asking, can we get more information either from the buildings or from the district as to how these days are going to be used. But the second piece is, I would assume if this is part of our professional development plan, is the assessment. Because the only role we have as a board is to make sure that the communication piece is in place. And secondly, if we're going to spend money on it, and we're going to impact teachers, administrators, and parents, that we assess the program. So at some point, I would assume, I will not be on this board when that happens, but I will be listening,
You could be.
possibly
You could
in
be.
the audience, but I will be listening to see how we doing with these PLRD days. And if we don't know what was discussed on any given day, any month, or just in some framework other than a list, I'd be curious as to how this board can assess it.
Well, that was part of it. It's the idea that we've been, how long we've had Metamorphosis in Bard now?
Pick a number, but go on.
No, they're very powerful programs.
4 years.
So 4 years.
3 years.
So how you, like, I want, again, I want to just preface by saying I'm really supportive of and want to continue to fund and support that, but it's the idea of, how do we know it's working? Do we know it's working, and how do you know? And I mean, that was part of the data ask that we had, how long ago was the data ask?
I'm not talking.
Well, no, because I want to know if they're working.
It circles back to how do you know?
No, that's all, you know, like,
I think the points that you're making are clear. I think for me, the struggle is how we're getting to the next step with calendar that we'll have to sort out leading up to the next meeting. I think you're talking about broader, more global.
Well, I would make a suggestion, if I might, just for your consideration. Just because, again, I want to be very clear that I fully support professional learning days. If you thought maybe about, until something that is fleshed out to help the community understand what these days are for, maybe if you went to one a month until that was ready, and then, I don't know, or maybe a plan gets prepared prior to the calendar vote. I don't know, but one of those two is probably a pretty good option.
I don't want to see it cut down. I just want to, I think.
I don't either. I'm just
starting
saying.
point is, let's just see what's been going on. Should be. I want to bring up one other point about the calendar. The 4 half-days. I know prior, like the first time I was on the board, we had this discussion about shortening those days, and then at some point it went to 2 half-days, and then it crept up to 3 half-days, and now we're up to 4 half-days. I feel like we're going in the reverse direction of what was discussed, because I don't remember ever discussing the need to add.
Well, we started with actually 1-hour days at the end of the year. I think in my first year, there was a 1-hour
Oh,
days,
yeah, I remember that.
that were problematic. This has been responsive to feedback and needs that have come from teachers as referenced.
You've got, so we've gone up and looking at your notes, Maria, so this is the most that's ever been on the calendar.
No, 1 year, 13, 14, we had 4.
Yeah. 13, 14.
I think that was the first year after the 1-hour days. And then we went to two half-days, and then we went to
I have to pull
3
out my
half-days.
files.
How do we decide, you might have said this already, how do we decide 3 versus 4?
Well, 3, actually, we worked at how some of the calendar shook out last year. We actually had, this year we have a half day, I think, on a Friday. And it was the pattern of how some of the days fell out. The feedback from faculty and staff at the elementary level has been consistently the desire for 4.
I think there's some hesitancy on the part of the board.
That's heard.
Okay.
Any other questions about the calendar?
Okay, I tried to jump ahead. Oh, this one? No, okay.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. We appreciate your participation in helping us understand the budget planning.
Just saying.
Erin, not now.
Are we moving to executive session?
Yeah, and you got more on the agenda.
We're about a quarter of the way through.
What did you just say?
We're about a quarter, we still have to talk about the bond and about a resolution related to,
We should force them to
And we have to
stay.
go through the policies.
Joking. Aaron, with all due respect, we have another 8 items to deal with. You need an email could handle? It doesn't matter.
Let's go.
I just want to make one comment
no, I'm
about the
sorry,
PLR.
we're gonna move along. We have, it's 11:15 and we still have a long meeting, and I invite you to email us, because as you know, we eventually get back.
Okay.
Sometimes sooner,
General
sometimes
meeting's
later.
not in the room yet.
Thank you. So we have item 5.1, secret resolution, the adoption of secret resolution, adoption of bond referendum resolution. And per my notes, we have to do a roll call vote.
Yeah. It's not part of the consent agenda.
So are there any questions related to this resolution before I?
To be clear, the SECR resolution.
The SECR 5.1?
5.1.
Which, do you want to give us a 30-second, which you've done in prior meetings as well?
Great job.
So basically, this is where the board adopts themselves as the lead agency, declaring there's a negative impact to the environment for the projects that we're about to do. So you have the documents, the short environmental assessment form that you've read, and you have the other 2 forms that you've read, the declaration form. And those forms are what you're saying that you now have read through them, and you have agreeing with what the architect and the engineer has put forth. Those documents are also on our website right now for the public to view, and they have been for this whole week.
Very good, thank you.
And I would say that these resolutions, both the secret and the bond proposition or resolution, are all generated and developed with legal counsel, bond counsel, and the architectural firm.
So, could I guess, we do
A roll call.
So first you make the motion.
You need a motion.
Second it, and then you do a roll call.
Okay. Can I get a motion to vote on 5.1
So
secret
moved.
resolution? Second. All right, so Maria and Brian, and so I guess we'll.
So Doreen has to call it.
Oh.
Aye.
Yay or nay?
I'd say yay, yay.
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 Yay. Thank you.
You guys did a heck of a job across the board.
Look at that big one there.
Part 2.
I'm just saying, I just want to say.
We are now at 5.2, adoption of a bond referendum resolution. Similarly, do you want to speak to what this is briefly, Carol? Or the-
And this is the actual resolution now to put the vote up on May 21st in the amount of, let's see if I can get this right, $18,867,640,000. That's all inclusive. That would be the maximum that the community, that we could spend on this, that we could go to bond on. And that would authorize us to start the project, get more detail, eventually bond it. And it's a couple year process to do this. And this resolution allows you to put this up for vote now for the community. It includes the actual wording that would be on the ballot in May, and that all the wording that also will be in our legal advertisements that isn't necessary to do before the vote. This also resolution has been on our capital projects folder for about a week now.
Okay.
One question and one thing I wanted to point out that I had asked Carol is that this resolution refers in the very first sentence, is hereby authorized to undertake a capital improvement, the project substantially as described in a plan. And so I just wanted to confirm, so the plan you had indicated was the plan that was presented last night to the Board of Trustees in
Correct.
Irvington, and this exact document will be in the voting booth?
We will have that there as the plan, and we'll have that presentation online, and we'll have it in a folder in the district office. should anyone come to request it, so.
Okay, and then where is it when you go to vote? Is it
Yeah,
on the table?
we'll retitle it so it's very clear that that is the capital project plan for the voter approval.
Say that again?
We will retitle it to make sure it says the capital project plan, yeah, right.
And then, but where is it physically, so in case people ask, oh, I want to
It'll be
look at it.
physically in the district clerk's office, the district office. It'll also be online in our capital project.
Nowhere in where you go to vote is what I'm trying to drive at.
We can bring it to the vote.
I just want to make sure everybody knows, so this is the plan that the voters are going to look at, is this one that we gave to the board of trustees last night that has the photos. It's just a condensed version of what we received. But I could imagine somebody reading this when they go to vote is going to wonder what the plan is. So if we retitle it, if we could leave it in there, there's no objection. I think it's a good.
I don't think we leave it in the polling site. We have it available at the polling location. So like at the information desk, like where you could check in with the clerk, it would be available if there's a reference question.
Great. Other than that, I'm good. Okay.
Could I get a motion to vote on 5.2, adoption of bond referendum resolution?
So moved.
Second.
I think I'm going to go with Deb 1 and Beth 2. And then over to you.
Yay. Yay.
Yay.
Yay.
Yay.
Yes, yay.
Yay.
And what was the motion in the first? You said it was, Ben and Beth?
Yeah. Yeah. Carol and Raina, thank you very much for that.
Yes.
Thank you for all of your hard work.
Now is it okay to say thank you?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
Well done. Job well
Now,
done.
now
Wait
it's,
till the 21st.
now it's the community who has
Yeah,
to
well.
move forward with this.
Yeah, but I just want to commend everybody who
Yeah.
worked on that. It was really,
Okay, consent agenda?
Yes, it
Oh,
could.
does that anything?
We have a consent agenda, and if there's any questions or any items you'd like to
yeah.
remove, we can, or to a separate item, that's always an option, but currently that includes a 7.1 resolution proposing legalization of retail marijuana sales for recreational use in New York State.
I'd like to separate that one, please.
Okay, appointment of a chief information officer. There's personnel matters, and
Personnel matters.
that's it.
I'd like to pull that one as well, the chief information officer,
Okay,
about separately.
so
Talk about
consent agenda.
I mean, you can talk about them without pulling them, or you can
Yeah,
pull them
we can
for a
just-
separate vote.
Whichever works for you.
If you can
let's
ask
just
questions
talk
about
about
them.
That's fine.
Okay.
You can have,
We can do that.
Okay.
I thought there was a separate thing.
no, so to have Robert's rules, to have a discussion, so you get you get a motion and a second, then you can have a discussion.
Okay.
So, but if but again, if you're pulling it, it's for a separate vote versus here, we're gonna discuss it and it's everything up and down in the consent agenda.
Well, I'd like to pull the
Marijuana.
marijuana one for separate vote.
All right, so is there a technical,
No, they just will have to make note and
So
adjust
you
the.
have to ask for a motion from 7.2 to 8.7.
I have a motion for 7.2 to trustee second, 8.7.
So moved.
So that would be Maria and Beth. And then, so does that mean we're gonna
My question is, it just
vote
a-
on those first?
Yeah.
So can I get all in favor for the consent agenda? That's all the items minus the resolution?
Aye. Aye.
Did I get to ask questions before?
Oh, you wanted to ask
I
questions?
wanted to ask about
the
the chief information officer.
Oh,
Okay,
oh, so sorry.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just, you know what, scratch it. I'm good.
Okay.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
So that's the consent agenda. And so now we have 7.1, a resolution opposing the legalization of retail marijuana sales for recreational use in New York State. Could I get a motion, we'll have a motion and then discussion. Can I get a motion to vote? No, I
Accept
mean,
7.1?
To accept 7.1.
Motion, are we voting on it or are we discussing it?
We have to move it, then discuss it.
Then vote on it.
Then
Got
vote.
it. Sorry.
So moved.
All right, second? All right,
Okay.
so Maura and Beth.
Beth, yep.
Okay, so now we can discuss it. We have a resolution before us.
I less wanted to discuss it and more just vote on it separately.
Okay.
Was
Would
really
anybody
my-
like to?
Make say about it?
No, I just don't think that this should be mixed with education. That's just my opinion, although I understand why it's there.
I did want to just, if it's okay with the board, to report out on what the PTSA did today on a similar resolution. Would that be helpful? Okay, so I got a letter. Dear Irvington Board of Education Trustees, this is from the Irvington, New York PTSA Executive Committee. The members of the Irvington PTSA Executive Committee would like to inform the Board of Education that we oppose the legalization of marijuana for recreational use as it is currently proposed in New York State. Our position is in agreement with the position of the State of New York PTA, which states as follows. We oppose the legalization of recreational marijuana. We recommend that proposals to legalize recreational marijuana use be removed from the state budget, and we support review of criminal sanctions for marijuana use, alternatives to incarceration, and the reevaluation of sentencing guidelines. Furthermore, we will encourage our membership to take a similar position at our upcoming general membership meeting will take place on April 23rd. As always, we support the wellness of all children, and we believe that our advocacy efforts around this position will ensure continued wellness for the children of Irvington. We will also be signing the petition, which I will describe to you in a moment, below, and encourage our community to do the same. Sincerely signed, the Irvington, New York PTSA Executive Committee. I will send the document to the board executive team, which provides within it the petition of the New York State PTA.
Thank you.
And I would just note that if the resolution is approved, it is sent to the Westchester County Legislature, State Legislature, the Governor of New York, and the Lieutenant Governor of New York.
Is anyone prepared to vote?
All in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Well, that's done.
Just wanted to be able to do that.
Fair enough.
Okay, we have
Okay. Comments from the community?
comment next meeting.
Would you like to comment?
Any comments from the community? Yeah, any comment?
I just quickly want to point out something that I discovered this week. I'm Erin Bernstein. I'm the parent of a third grader. As far as the PLRD dates, I don't oppose them at all. The one thing, though, that came to light is that in the elementary school, the Wednesday specials are consistently abbreviated on those days. So, like my son takes art on Wednesdays, which now is his favorite subject, and so it's consistently shorter. So I don't know if there's a way, and this might be too confusing, but can you run like a Monday schedule on a Wednesday and run a Wednesday on a Monday, just so that it's not the same class that's consistently impacted, especially if it happened to be gym? I think that would be more concerning. So I just wanted to point that out. That's all. And I just learned it from my soon-to-be 9-year-old.
And I think that's a great
Thank you.
pack issue.
That's good feedback.
Yeah. What was that?
And that's also a great pack issue to bring up to the
For the
BPs, for
Parent
the
Advisory
parents.
Council?
Because they can work with the building principal on that.
Oh, okay. I'll write to the pack. That's a
Yeah.
good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for staying. Okay, meeting notice?
We have a meeting before this, today.
That's the next regularly scheduled board meeting. There's an executive session on the 27th at 6:30 p.m.
So we have an executive session on the 27th, and our next regularly scheduled board meeting is Tuesday, April 2nd at 7:30.
Tanya's here.
Oh, I was looking down reading, sorry.
It's okay, no problem.
Thank you
Tanya
for
Hunt.
staying.
Thank you for your support of the resolution. I ask, of course, is against legalization, and we appreciate your stance on the issue as well.
Yeah, and thank you to IASC and CAB for all their work they're doing with our community and students on behalf of making healthy choices.
That make me the bad guy, Tanya?
So, given that, I think I said where the meeting is, we'll be here in the campus presentation room, so thank you. And I think given the hour that we have a meeting next week, are there any items that we have to?
Nothing that we have to.
Is our meeting next week?
Okay, so I'm going to call
Change it to
a
Monday,
motion
right?
to adjourn our meeting.
So moved?
Okay, Maria and Maura, all in
Right.
favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Didn't they kick you out? That was-
Passes unanimously.